so I will be a dictator for the rest of the afternoon. I'm sure that CCG is allergic to that word, but for the purposes of this afternoon, dictatorship shall be legal in this room, and I will assume the full rights as an autocratic leader for the purposes of this afternoon. So speaking rights will only be authorized by Life President Ben Mwine, who is Life President for one day. Each of us will have to raise their placards if you want to make a contribution for our panelists. I'm sure you have the card, so you have to raise that if you want to make a contribution. Points of information will be authorized by myself as well, and these are rules that you've heard already. I'm just going through them to make the same page. And then the way the debate is going to work is this. Each of our panelists will be given 5 uninterrupted minutes to be able to make their presentation on the topic. 3 minutes of those, they will not be touched. The last 2, you will be allowed to have a point of information by other people. And during those 5 minutes, they will be protected for the first 2 minutes and the last minute, okay? And the co-panelists can be able to raise points of information only during the 3rd, 4th minute, and I'll be using my timer to keep track of that. For the rest of us in the house audience, we will have ample time to make contributions and rejoin us after the presentations have been made. And then after that, we'll come back to our dinosaurs, judges, to come and give brief remarks. See, they hadn't got that. They need to get used to this idea so that they learn that we need them to hand over to you guys. So I want our judges to become a bit more comfortable with the concept that you are indeed becoming dinosaurs. Okay, that's too harsh. Let's go with endangered species, right? Is that a little bit more friendly for you guys? Right, so our endangered species will be given enough time to try and give their remarks about what they have heard, and of course to then announce who our winner and runner-up for the afternoon. So I hope the rules are very clear, and I think we now should then be ready to go. Right. Let me call the panelists up to the front one by one, and then we'll get into the first one. And I'm going to ask, since you've already had lunch and some sugar for lunch, please give them a very big round of applause, starting from Nkumba University, Mr. Lester Garang. Give him a big hand clap as he comes. From Mbarara University of Science and Technology, we've got Mr. Edgar Mutungisa. A big hand clap for him as well. Representing Busitema University, we've got Mr. Titus Ngabirano. And finally, representing Kampala International University, we've got Mr. Titus Ogutu as well. There are many questions about why all panelists are male. And this is just a challenge to the ladies in the house. For 2023, all our finalists should be women. Challenge thrown to you guys, so let's make sure that we work towards that. Panelists, I hope you're ready. I must advise, Google is not allowed for this afternoon. So please put the phones away in the pockets. I hope the rules are very clear. And we are ready to go. Again, you have 5 minutes. The first 2 minutes are protected. We can then have interjections for minute 3 and 4. And then the final minute for you to be able to conclude. My timer will start when I call your name and you come up, and then we'll start from there. And I will set an alarm so that you know when the time has run up. I will be giving a tap on the table like this. That will show that the first 2 minutes are up and therefore open to rejoin us. And then after that, I will come back to hand over the final minute to each of you. I hope we are ready. It's now exactly 3:35, and we'll be keeping time because at the Center for Constitutional Governance, we believe that governance starts with discipline, and the easiest form of discipline is timekeeping. Okay, ready. We'll start from Nkumba University with Mr. Garang Lester, who will pick up the microphone from me, and then I don't know if you want to use the podium or, okay, I will step away from the podium and allow you to come. Your time will start the moment you say your first words.
Okay, thank you very much for continuously listening to us and for giving us the opportunity to speak to all of you. The state of Uganda's economy, and this is a very critical opening, is something that should move beyond conversational narratives to actively participatory narrative. And that is why this speech is going to be very important. That is if it is a speech. You see, Uganda, as a third world country, is a country that is still struggling economically. With that in mind, and with this conversation happening after the budget reading, it is a very critical thing to then discuss that from the budget, critical things stood out, that about 37.4 billion shillings was the GDP of the country. Uganda's GDP then stands at. Comparatively, our neighbors in Kenya have 98.8 billion US dollars of GDP. So the reason why the comparatives are important is that when you don't take time to go out and maybe eat from other cooks, you may think that your mother is the best cook. So no matter how much we argue within the context of Uganda without comparing ourselves with how we are faring outside, we don't make it. Then the annual GDP growth of Uganda is 2.9% rate of GDP growth. Comparatively, Kenya has 5.9 GDP growth rate annually. And then lastly, the population. The population of Uganda is 45.7 and Kenya is 53. Now let's pause the population. No matter how many we are, there is no excuse for doing economically poorly. So economics are divided into two. There is the macroeconomics and the microeconomics. Now the macroeconomics of any country have a strong link with the microeconomics because the microeconomics are what then feeds the macroeconomics. And for a country to then have a nice economics or a macroeconomics context, then it gets blood from its microeconomics. So which is why this argument or this particular conversation is going to be important for that Ugandan who is still selling bananas or whatever they're selling on the streets and do not have access to market. Now, in the shock doctrine by Naomi Klein, she argues that there is the rudimentary Friedman economic system of approach which would outgrown. The approach that simply gives utmost power into the hands of the capitalists, for the capitalists to then decide how the markets proceed. That, I think, is what has hurt the economy of Uganda. Because at the end of the day, the capitalists are then profit-driven, and because of the driven profit, they not pay attention to the need that Uganda has to grow from grassroots. Now, the reason why I'm making this is that, economically speaking, by liberalization of economy, Uganda's hands have been taken off from interest rates controls, price controls, and setting of minimum wages. The implication of this is that interest rates have skyrocketed, and therefore Ugandans cannot access loans to fund their business growth. When that happens is other companies that have actually money with their capacity from outside can then outcompete the Ugandan companies within the context of Uganda. So a lot of people that are making money in the market in the country are people that come from outside and not Ugandans, and at the end of the day, the economies that are being fed are not Ugandan economies. The reason why this argument is important is that government should still retain control so that government can decide who to incentivize and why to incentivize. When that happens, therefore, then government can be able to incentivize local industries to then grow to be able to sustain their economy. The argument I'm making is if the microeconomics of Uganda cannot support the macroeconomics, then Uganda will do as poorly as I started with in the global or regional context, as I just compared us with Kenya. So interest rates, as you speak, are now 7.5%. If that is very high, how about that Ugandan who is struggling, starting their business to then be able to compete with the Googles of this world, to be able to compete with the Coca-Colas of this world? How does such a person then make it to the global market to then be able to make money for themselves and as by extension for the economy of Uganda? So in my final minutes, the argument I'm trying to make is government should retain control over the economy so that government can be able to determine by policy and by policies like this, then which part of the economy to then incentivize for that to grow. And in a capitalist context, then we shall still be crippled as we are. In subsequent arguments, I will tell you why all these and more is important. For now, I'd like to listen to Edgar. Thank you.
Give a big hand clap to Mr. Garang Lester, who used up the entire 5 minutes quite well, I must say. We will then now move on very swiftly to Mbarara University of Science and Technology, represented by Mr. Edgar Mut. And your 5 minutes will start when you say your first word. You have 5 minutes. The first two are protected. I will tap the bottle. You will hear a clank to show that your 2 minutes have elapsed, at which point you will be open to interjections, and then you'll have another minute at the end. In case there are no interjections, of course, like Mr. Garang did, you are able to use your 5 minutes fully. So your time starts now.
Thank you so much, Mr. Moderator. I think for this discussion, we ought to understand different things in context, because we can't just debate economics by the book, then others wouldn't have the debate. We need to understand the context of Uganda. We wouldn't really agree entirely that we need a government-controlled sort of an economy, given the nature of our government. A government whose Minister of Finance signs agreements by mistakes, a government where the MPs themselves are being educated about the double taxation agreements, and Seatino was giving a report on how most of them need to even know how they work. So there's a lot of need for sensitization for even the government officials themselves to understand how the economy works. So to leave the economy in such hands of individuals would be such a mistake. We can't go that way, Mr. Lester. But we can have a combination of both, because there is need for regulation anyways, because you can't also leave the economy only to capitalists. Otherwise, they would not care about environmental rights, they would not care about human rights, they would violate labor laws and etc. So there needs to be a balance and not an entirely government controlling the economy. Very important for context. But beyond that, how is Uganda's economy? Generally, I think it's poor. Everyone can agree to that. We have issues of rising prices. We have very many issues of some sort of lack of structures. You saw this last time when our trucks were stuck in Malaba, on that Malaba port, and we could not have to use maybe some sort of petroleum from our own reserves, perhaps because they are empty, and maybe the government may say otherwise. So there's very many different problems that exist, even structurally, that we need to address. The economy is generally poor. But most important, we need to understand that the context of this country is a country that is landlocked. This is very important, especially when you understand that in the concept of macroeconomics, that means the country doesn't just simply benefit from how Edgar here earns. You also need to have some sort of regional, backing and some sort of regional cooperation. It's why we have conversations on EAC. It's why we have conversations currently on the African Continental Free Trade Area, so that we can be able to have that sort of mass distribution, not distribution, but that mass, gathering of resources, so that can be able to compete. So it's very important in that context. Therefore, a country that is landlocked like Uganda, we ought need to interrogate its relations in terms of border and how it does trade. Remember recently, Kenya had banned us to have the exports when we're exporting maize and etc. on issues of quality, right? Whatever that means we need some sort of quality regulation mechanisms, other than East African community, maybe, for instance, so that you don't have these instances where your product cannot go to Kenya just because the quality is questionable. It's very important in understanding economics, because economics also matter and they come with quality. Very important sort of context. But beyond that, we need to also understand what is the other problem with the economy. The economy, I'll take it later. This is very important. I'll take it shortly. The economy also, we need to shift somehow to the night economy. This is very important. The night economy, since the recovery from COVID-19, let me just come to that later. The night economy is very important. I'm going to be expounding it on later, because the night economy is important for two reasons. One is that because of COVID-19, there is that sort of looming where people are still caught up within those kind of...
On control. Okay. The kind of control that I argue for is not an absolute government control per se, but it's control that permits the government to then be able to decide the fiscal and monetary policies of the state. As we speak, that is highly not there, and that's why the corporate world has taken over the economy, and as the president argued in his budget speech, that is non-existent, and that is why the Ugandans cannot compete within their country. How do they compete globally if they can't? Thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much. It's very, I think largely you tried to make a point there, but it's very important to understand in terms of fiscal policy, when you have a government official, Minister of Finance, reputable, who signs agreements with Fineti and etc. and then says, I did it by mistake, guys, come on, Again, you can't give that sort of fiscal, growth to such ministers. Very important to understand the context and the quality of ministers we have in this government. Important, Mr. Garang. Now, on night economy. Night economy is very important because COVID largely disrupted it, right? Because of curfews and etc. and the recovery has been totally bad. But why does night economy matter? I think one of the officials is from New York, will testify, right? Because in the New York, night economy contributes about $35.1 billion. That's night economy. And when you come here, maybe in Kampala, that's where you find some offices operating up to morning, but mostly in cities like Mbarara and UTC, major cities, people still close shops at around 5 p.m., at maybe 10 p.m. and UTC. That is very disastrous, because understanding that we have an issue of unemployment as a country. Now, what the night economy does, for instance, it also has to come with some sort of regulation. But the chief benefit of it is that you're able to, in a way, cut off unemployment. That means industries will start to require people who work night shifts, as opposed to currently, where you all needed in the day shift, unless in special circumstances where you overworked for you to be able to go past your working hours. So that means that an economy that is 24/7, that night economy, would be very important and very strategic in terms of unemployment, because different people will definitely now find even jobs, because you can't work 24 hours. That means you have to replace someone when he's going to sleep, and now you create more jobs and many other opportunities. Talk about taxes and etc.
Time.
Very important. Thanks so much for listening.
Let's give him a very, very big hand clap. A big hand clap for Mr. Mutungisa Edgar. Let's move on to Busitema University. And of course, remember, we're trying to figure out Uganda's economy, the state of Uganda's economy, which way? And some very interesting thoughts being made so far. Let's hear from Mr. Titus Ngabirano from Busitema University.
Thank you very much, the moderator. Now, the beauty about this is that we're just generally discussing Uganda's economy without giving into context a specific idea or a school of thought, or basically focusing on a specific aspect. First and foremost, you get to realize that the first two speakers have given to us a generalized, and in most cases I call it a theoretical approach to achieving most of these things. First and foremost, what should we know? Yes, if we get to realize that Uganda's current GDP is at 37.4 billion, as my brother Garang said, but then we ask ourselves the question, of the 45.7 million, how many people contribute largely to the 37.4 million whatsoever GDP dollars of Uganda every year? You get to realize that you have a normal distribution curve whereby the majority of the people in Uganda are living below the poverty line. That's why the president of Uganda will today state that we are about to achieve middle income status, Yet actually, we are still having a unit GDP of $0.8. But then into context, you'll get to realize that deep down, the unit person, let me say omuntu wa wansi in context, is at a GDP of around $0.4 per person. Now, moving forward, when I talk about Uganda's economy, we have to realize some of these things. That is, as of 2022, there are three key aspects or challenges that have affected Uganda's economy. 1, COVID, 2, climate change, and 3, the locust invasion. Why do I raise these three aspects in particular? It is because Uganda is entirely a subsistent kind of farming, and basically most of its citizens generate their income from farming. Now, when COVID came into perspective, most of these people who had long distance journeys to go to their farms were left out. Now, when COVID came, us citizens staying back home were forced to affect the climate in numerous ways. For instance, there was a high increase in the number of trees being cut down for firewood. 2, so that people could be able to save money, so that they could be able to cater for their families. Now, when the locust invasion came, it could not have affected all regions in the country, but then the locust invasion came, we had a reduction in the amount of food generated by a country, and also had a decline in household incomes. Now, 3, with the introduction of these things, we had serious loss of jobs, and also had serious food insecurity. Now, we as Uganda, with such an economic standpoint, we ask ourselves the question that, yes, the budget was read this week, but then the context is, yes, I'll take the question.
Since you emphasize on emphasis, on a sort of context, so to what extent, like to your analysis, you haven't told us how is the economic situation and how your things of climate justice in a way become a remedy or very important for this particular discussion.
Thank you very much, Edgar. I would request we pay attention. Thank you very much. Moving forward, I stated that let me first respond to that question, then get to the other one. I stated that the climate change, COVID, and the locust invasion affected the farming practices of us as a nation, which is the major generation of revenue of the country. Thank you very much. Yes, next question.
On that, the argument you make is that you seem to allude that before COVID or before locust, the Ugandan economy was fairly doing well, which is a lie. because the economy was already bad before locusts arrived or COVID. So the case we want to make in this important conversation is why the economy has been doing badly even before this.
Yes, thank you very much. Thank you very much, Mr. Garang. I would like to clarify this, and I would like to request my fellow panelists to listen to every dot of word. As I stated, these things made the economy worse. I did not say the economy was good, and I do not want us to be misquoted. Thank you very much. Now, it was already a horrible economy, but these three issues made it way worse as it was before. Now, the economic activity has a strategical. Now, after this happened, we get to realize that now we as a country, as we're reading the 2022 budget, there was one thing that beat my understanding. What is the government prioritizing over others? That's why I'm asking myself the question of tax prioritization. We get to realize that the government has decided to prioritize beer and reduce the taxation on beer, yet keeping the taxation of wheat high at over 1,000 Uganda shillings, and also keeping the taxation of fuel at over 1,000 Uganda shillings. Now, moving forward, the moment you let the taxation of fuel, the moment you let the taxation of fuel remain that high, you're getting yourself into a fix whereby fuel affects all other economic activities at the end of the day. We can acknowledge that the current economic status of Uganda is very horrible. But then you cannot prioritize beer and reduce the taxation on beer and leave the taxation of fuel, which drives almost everything, be it machine, vehicles, or any other aspect. Now, I'd also like to advise Mr. Edgar that you as an engineer, you get to realize that most of the companies we work in, or dare to work in a shift of 3 shifts a day, 8 hours a shift. Now, it beats my understanding whereby we, instead of us encouraging other companies, most especially small-scale companies and medium-scale companies, to incorporate in such policies, yes, as I summarize, we get to be faced with the challenge of prioritizing only the macro companies. I beg to rest. Thank you very much.
Let's give a bigger hand clap to Titus. It's not easy being able to make points like that with the limited time and the pressure coming onto you, and to still find the English to use. So it's commendable, and I think our finalists definitely are earning some points with the judges. I can see lots of that going on. So let's hear from our final panelist before we then get some questions. So I will ask them some questions after this, and then we'll open it up to the rest of the house to be able to ask some questions before we then find out who our winner is. And our last presentation is going to come from Mr. Titus Ogutu from Kampala International University. Just a quick reminder of the rules, just in case. His first 2 minutes are protected. When those 2 minutes run out, I will tap the bottle. In those next 2 minutes, you can interject. Your interjections must be no more than 30 seconds, after which he will then have a minute that is also protected to close his argument. Your time starts now.
Thank you so much. I would want to bring a context from a very unique version. In 1972 or 1971, when Idi Amin took over Uganda, he thought that one of the solutions to Ugandans was by expelling the Asians, because he believed the problem was the Asians. And when the economy was put in the Ugandans, we all know what happened. Currently, Uganda is facing inflation rates, which happens to be at 6.3. And of course, one of the most trading countries that Uganda tends to trade with is the US, experiencing an inflation rate at 8.6. Now, let me come back to the Ugandan economy. The Ugandan economy is characterized by certain fields. One, tourism, farming, revenue, trade, and entertainment. Now, definitely I don't agree with Edgar's Edgar's solution of the night economy as being a solution. The night economy cannot give us money, okay? And history clearly shows us that from the 10-point programs of the NRM, program number 5 said creating a self-sustaining economy that is independent. What do we see currently? We are seeing externalization of labor. And so many Ugandans are suffering from outside Uganda. And they even do not bring back the dollars we see. They instead come back with missing kidneys, malnourished, looking funny, and you can just go on and go on. Now, they keep on mentioning here statistics of GDP, dollar, what. My friend, GDP is a general concept. for all Ugandans. But if you are going to look at a typical Ugandan, then you need to address the income per capita of a Ugandan. Can a Ugandan afford the cost of living? Look at the standard of living of a Ugandan. Dear judges and panel, be keen. In 1990, if I am to extend it near, probably I will go with 2005, a basin cost 5,000 shillings and a bar of soap cost 3,000 shillings. Right now, a basin is 7,000 shillings and a bar of soap is 10,000. So you can see how dynamics are changing. We live in a country where most of the sections are privatized to actually foreigners who are given 100% profit repatriation. Foreigners who employ Ugandans and they are just paying penny wages and yet they work for so many hours. So we do not see the quality of lives of Ugandans expanding. Now, honorable judges, right now we have fuel prices. Those of you who have vehicles who are blessed by God, I'm sure it should be around 6,000 shillings. Honorable judges, I would want to bring to this debate what happened to the 400 billion that was supposed to address the standard gauge railway. I mean, why do we forget things so quick? Why are we so forget things so quick just like that? I mean, 400 billion for the standard gauge railway, it's nowhere to be seen. They are talking about rehabilitation. What are you going to rehabilitate at a time when fuel is at 7,000? I mean, we need some reshuffling of our minds. I'll take you shortly. Let me make this point, and then you'll come on. Okay, fine. Please say.
So, while it is very glamorous to tell us how badly Ugandans are doing, I think it is important that we appreciate the explanations behind why that is happening.
Then you need to give me time and listen, because you wouldn't have made that point. I've got your point. Let me make my point. So the point is, lack of political will. In the last 36 years, what have we seen? The NRM government came with something called the Structural Adjustment Program. It came with the Bonaba Gagawale. It came with the NADS program. Shortly, let me make my point. I will accept you my next spec. Okay, please go.
Yes, moving forward, you talked about privatization. You as a panelist, do you believe privatization is a bad thing?
Privatization is good for an economy that can sustain development. Ugandan government and the policies which are in place do not sustain development. Clearly, look at the informal sector. What solution is being provided? Look at the employment rates, okay? Why can't incentives be provided for the informal sector so that at least the normal Ugandan can earn something at the end of the day? Why can't the formal sector be subjected to certain taxes? I mean, one of my brother here said that the corporate world is one of the solutions of Ugandans. I would want to ask my co-panelists and put it to the judges that who owns the corporate world in Uganda? I mean, 90% are foreigners. So when you come here and you speak something that you're not clear about, let's go with reality instead of just making fallacies that you cannot defend. Now, I would want to give the political will. In the past 36 years, I happen to be in my sweet 24s. But I have never seen a change of government. So when you come here and you say that we need to talk about government, I do not understand what you're saying. Yet the current president says that actually the past governments should be criminalized for the effects that we are facing right now. I think there is something that needs to be worked on. Now, look at the consistency of the security budget, okay? Does it reflect economic development, or it's just the welfare operations for certain institutions in Uganda? You know, there is one man who said that stupidity is doing the same thing, expecting different results. That is the Ugandan government, and it needs a reshuffle. If we can't fix the politics, we can't fix the economics. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Ogutu. And let's give the panelists another big hand clap for their very passionate presentations. I don't know if the judges award marks for this, but at some point I did see some panelists nodding their head in approval at other panelists' submissions, so I'm not sure if there are special marks for that, but it probably means that you, by the time your competition is acknowledging your points, then you know you've probably got something right. Right, so I've got a couple of questions, just more than a couple. We'll try and go through these, and what we'll do is I'll ask a question and each of you will get 2.5 minutes each to respond to it. It's protected time, so it's up to you to try and make sense of this. It gives you an opportunity to, off the cuff, be able to impress our judges with your knowledge of the things that you have been preparing for and telling us about. Let's try and see how much you know about that. My first question for you is about the state of Uganda's economy. You've made some thoughts on that in terms of which way you think we need to go, or in some cases, maybe simply lamented about the state and not given a way forward. That will be for the judges to decide. What I do want to ask is, in terms of the problems that we have, and my first question is, and we'll start from here and go across the table, why do we have income inequality, and why are we seeing, and if you want to write this down, please do, to make sure you get the question correctly. Why do we have income inequalities? Why are workers not empowered anymore? We have an erosion of workers' power, especially considering recent incidences with industrial action from teachers and health workers, among others, which don't seem to have yielded much. Why do you think we have income inequalities and erosion of workers' power and them not being able to have any collective power to make changes? So we'll start with Titus, Ogutu, and then I will time you. You'll have 2.5 minutes to make a submission, and then after that, we'll go to each of the panel before I ask the next question.
Thank you so much, moderator. Now, the reason why we still have some of these things is because the government thinks it can provide the money for the Ugandans. But we have brilliant minds that can actually work out solutions for themselves. It's not a thing that government must give us monies in despite of the parish development model, and you think development will just come naturally. I mean, that's a fallacy. It's more of a political welfare appreciation. I say, thank you so much for voting the NRM in power. I don't mean to be political, but let's speak reality. Because there is no way you're going to expect a parish chief to be with a diploma, yet for one to go to parliament, just needs senior 6 enough. We need to be a little bit critical when we are discussing some of these issues. Now, the mistake that government makes in terms of industrial actions is because it does not get a holistic, transformative solution. Because there is no way you can focus on one mind and you leave out the other. Take, for instance, one of the reasons why the teachers, the allied nurses are striking is because a lot of money was mismanaged during COVID-19. We do not understand how much money was spent on buying vaccines. If you ask any of the panelists here, how much did Uganda spend on buying vaccines, other than the donors that we received, you may not get the figures, but money was spent. I heard the president say that we are making a vaccine. I do not understand. Is it Covidex or Covilice? So we really need to be a little bit critical in some of these things. The reason why Ugandans do not have money, it's because the very government has made it difficult for Ugandans to have money, has subjected them from tax after tax. And because of these excessive taxation policies that we see, Ugandans still remain broke. They cannot afford life. You get. So you even find that a person who is qualified cannot contribute tuition for his child. Why? Because of excessive expenditures of the executive. I mean, look at how much is spent on the gowns of the judges. Just look at that. Look at the allowances of MPs. How do you expect that to be translated into the local man down? So clearly, the budget looks to be a theoretical paper of improvements, but the local man down there is not going to benefit from it. Why? Because there is just this mindset that, you know what, you have to work for it. The minister said you have to work for it, but where are you going to work it from when you are failing to give me peanuts that you're actually subjecting to taxes at the end of the day? Now, let me come back to the industrial action. My brother here had so many statistics which were good. GDP, and he actually forgot that for a normal Ugandan, we should be considering the income per capita. If the man can actually earn a good life, can he actually buy sugar at the end of the day, or can he buy salt at the end of the day? But times have changed. So when times change, that means we need to get new techniques of trading. One condition, just to critically put to the panel and also inform the panel, Uganda intends on trading or making direct flights to London, but a person in Uganda cannot have a direct flight to Jinja or even Mukono. So what are you talking about? Okay? You have failed to get a market in South Sudan or in Kenya, and you expect to trade with the US. You want to trade, you have failed to make trade relations with Congo, but you cannot, and you're imagining you want to trade with London. I mean, the government will just continue benefiting, and there will be no money in the economy. Thank you.
Thank you. I hope the judges will note that Mr. Ogutu refused to hand over my microphone after I told him it was time. Let's move on to the other Titus, Ngabirano, representing Busitema University, to come and answer the same question about why we have income inequalities and erosion of workers' power.
Thank you very much, the moderator. Now, when my fellow panelists comes here and says that government shouldn't provide money and all those other things, then you zero down to the aspect of the budget. What do we as a nation prioritize year in, year out? You got to realize that we prioritize yes, things are necessary. We need the infrastructure, we need the security, but then we as a nation, what should we prioritize at the end of the day? Now, why do we have income inequality? That is a question that I posed to my fellow Titus to reason it out. Now, why do we have income inequality, we as a nation? We get to realize that the reason we have income inequality and also the workers are not well empowered is because of two basic reasons. In the period of the Obotes and the Amins, as His Excellency calls them, the past regimes, you get to realize that these people valued and accepted the structures of workers' unions. The current status quo does not acknowledge the fact that all these workers have the workers' union to be put in place and acknowledged for their existence and the roles they used to play in maintaining the standards of working, and two, to ensure that the workers are well paid at the end of the day. Now, with that kind of aspect and also knowledge at the back of your mind, you get to realize that this will drill down and dive us into income inequality. Income inequality was formed by the rushed process of privatization by the government of Uganda without clearly structuring it and finding out what is essential for the country to be prioritized first and what shouldn't be prioritized later. As my brother said, that why would we trade with London and not trade with DRC Congo? You get to realize that some of the aspects of we cannot trade with DRC Congo is because of the political instability there. We may not be the most political stable nation in the world, but you can acknowledge that at least the stability of our nation gives us the right and mandate to be able to trade with the nations like the UK and stuff like that. Two, when you talk about necessity of a priority, you cannot come here and tell me that you need a flight from here to Jinja, yet there's a question of necessity over priority. Is it really, really necessary for me to board a plane from Kampala to Jinja? But isn't it necessary for me to board a plane from Kampala to the United Kingdom? It then zeroes down to the context of necessity over priority. Now, going back to the part of income inequality, we talked about privatization. When I talk about privatization, you get to realize that most of the sectors in Uganda right about now have been over-prioritized to the extent that we are failing to get the reason why the very many incentives are given to foreigners, yet they do not return most of the profits at the end of the day. Take an example. A company will be formed here, and it will be called Dutch Apartments. 10 years later, after the tax holiday of 10 years is done, the company will just change name. Now, according to the constitution and the financial policies of Uganda, that new company, if it is under foreign investment, has an entitlement to a 10-year tax holiday. So then you ask the question of yes, privatization would be fine, but you should also put into consideration that as the local investors, how are you as the government giving me Omuntua as I 10 seconds to summarize this essential thing. We as the local investor, how are you giving me priority as a Ugandan? That's why I zeroed on the post of tax prioritization. What tax is essential to the country, and why would you prioritize beer over fuel? Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Ngabirano. I should put a disclaimer and point out that on the record, as far as we are aware, Arch Apartments does not have a tax holiday. And so any use of them in that conversation was purely for example and not factual. Since we are recording this, so we don't want to be sued for having been accused of saying that they have a tax holiday. Right, wonderful presentation so far. I must say, personally, I'm impressed because when I was thinking about this question, why does Uganda have income inequality? The reason is very simple. Some people are paid more than others, so that's the answer I had in my mind, but I'm getting some very interesting answers. The question, of course, now being then why. So we hear from Mr. Edgar Mutungisa before we hear finally from Mr. Lester Garang on this question. I'll ask two more questions and then we'll open it up to the floor. You have 2.5 minutes. Your time starts now.
Okay, thank you so much. So the question of income inequality is, I appreciate my brother Titus for great motivational speaking. But, but I don't think there was really a core. You were simply addressing why you don't have money, which I don't think was really a question. So we need to understand the different factors at play. As I explained earlier, the problem here is deeply structural. That's why even before COVID, even before this, we still had these problems. So they're not just some picky things and just mentioned. So very important. Then what are the problems? Number one is that we ourselves have lost value in the fellow Ugandans. That's why in a question of like incentives and ETC, we give foreigners and ETC, but the Ugandan rate at which we give them incentives is bad. The problem with that, and in relation to income inequalities, is that even these investors then start to feel like they are, a class apart. So they are leveraged to treat you as an animal, because anyways, that's how your government treats you, start with. So that's very important. And that's how they can overwork you and still pay you peanuts, because what are you going to do anyways? Zero, you know? That's number one. Number two, we need to understand that there's also some position in terms of some gender prejudice, whereas we are taking a step in gender notions, but there's still that prejudice. The fact that the world, these economics of ours are so much capitalistic that they're so much driven by profit incentives. So when people look at, for instance, now I have to employ this woman, and then may need a maternal leave or this kind of leave, you know. So there's that deep, you know, that lacking appreciation of those factors from this even business, you know, community that has continuously, in a way, prejudiced women, and it's why sometimes they pay them peanuts, or even don't pay them when they weigh their capitalistic incentives. That's why the government sort of engagement of Leicester comes into play, though not entirely, as I had already disagreed. Yeah, very important. But then lastly, I think we also need to look at the sort of dependence and then bad politicians generally. There are some situations that are just out of bad politicians, not structure as a case. For instance, so you have a president who says, well, science teachers, 4 million, the art teachers can as well just get 800,000 shillings. I mean, there's no deep structure really, you know, reasoning to that. It's just bad politics, and we can discuss later. So that's a very big problem. But then as I conclude, I think there was a very pertinent issue, because I made some claim on how the night economy is very important, and someone tells me the night economy want to bring in money. And I wonder if the digital economy, if the daily economy can bring money, why it makes you think night economy has to bring money? When people go to bars and etc., do they go there for free? I think that claim was really so vague and not really to explain. That's to be honest. I think that's very important, because it's at the core, because part of the reasons we explain here were to structure the fact that we have people who are always flying to Dubai and etc., partly because they lack employment here. What that means, we ought to revolutionize our economy to go from that basic one that you're used to, of I wake up early in the morning and then by 5 I have to go back to bed, and be able to create that other addition. It's almost like a double economy, so that you can even double the number of employment. It's very important when you understand it principally. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mutungisa. Finally, we'll have Mr. Lester Garang come and tell us why he thinks we have these income inequalities and erosion of workers' power.
Okay, so ladies and gentlemen, you will choose to forgive or not forgive, but I think I'm so obsessed with the principle. Because we can discuss that people earn different wages, people have different things, the income per capita argument, feeble as it is. But what is the basic principle why there exists income inequality, or why other people earn higher than others? And that's what we need to pay attention to, because if that principle is solved, then the rest of the thing will become automatic. So what is the principle? If government loses control on deciding how much who is paid, there is a fundamental problem. Because what then happens is, we fail to then be able to set a minimum wage for people and say we cannot pay people below this. So you can decide that you can pay an Edgar for driving for 8 hours a day and you pay him 50,000 because that is what you want to pay him. If he speaks, you will threaten him with firing and losing their job. In this hustle economy where getting a job is very hard, an Edgar who earns 50 for riding for 8 hours will settle for that 50, and that is how people earn differently from others. The argument therefore is government needs to then retain the power again to define some of these economic policies. The absolute privatization and liberalization of the economy is the fundamental and the principle that I argue, that we need back, yes, we need economic liberalization, but not to the extremes, to an extent that government cannot decide how much its people actually earn for the worth of what they do. Then the second thing is the structural adjustment programs. This policy of the IMF that started over 20 years ago is a thing that we need to pay critical attention to. Because what that does is, it then forced governments to then structurally scale down on their public employment, that you reduce and you privatize a lot of, or outsource a lot of government, would-be government provided services to the people so that the private sector provides them. What that led to is that a lot of people lost jobs in the government, and then they cannot get the jobs in the private sector, and at the end of the day, a lot of people remain unemployed. So the reason why the structural adjustment program were a loss to the developing world and to Uganda in the particular context is that a lot of Ugandans lost their jobs because there was this policy of the IMF to force you to reduce on your public employment employment, reduce on the people that work for the government, so that the government can privatize some of its provided services. And that is what led to underfunding of the service provision by the government. And that's why the government cannot fund education as it should, cannot fund health as it should. The implication of that is that so that it allows for the private sector to then come in and provide these services at a very high cost that Ugandans can't afford, and then paying Ugandans meagerly so that people earn differently. This is the principal understanding for why there exists the difference in people's earnings, and that is where all these issues can come in. So if you cannot solve the principle, then you don't exist. Then on the second part of it is that the disempowering of workers. Again, we need to understand that the first thing that happened is workers were vilified. They were treated as a threat to government. And right now, workers' unions don't exist, like Titus argued. And that's where the problem started from. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Garang. Again, I hope you have noted there were two parts to that question, and I think the second one was just as important, the issue of workers' power being eroded and why they don't have any power anymore. So, and how we deal with that. We'll go on to my second question. I will reduce the amount of time you have, again, because quality is just as important as quantity. So it can't just be about the number of words, it's about the substance in those words. So this should put you under a bit more pressure to think very critically about what sort of answer you give to my next question. For every question I ask, I'll reduce the time. If we have enough time, I would like to take you to a point where you have to give a 4-second answer and see how important that will be to impress the judges. So we'll see how that goes. My next question for you is about the trade policies we have as a country. Are you aware of what our trade policies are? What are those in your opinion? And why do you think we seem to have a permanent trade deficit as a country? I'll just repeat that question again for you. If you have an awareness of our trade policies, what they are, and why, if indeed it is your opinion, we seem to have a permanent trade deficit as a country. We'll follow the same order, starting with Mr. Ogutu, and then Mr. Ngabirano, Mr. Mutungisa, and finally Mr. Garang. And your time now will be reduced to 2 minutes. The last part of the question is about our trade deficit and why you think we are perpetually nursing a trade deficit. So we'll start with you, Mr. Ogutu. You have 2 minutes to answer this question, and then you'll pass on the microphone to Mr. Ngabirano, then to Mr. Mutungisa, and finally to Mr. Garang.
Thank you. First of all, Edgar believes that people going to bars will provide money for Ugandans. Funny. So literally the night economy is not a solution, once again. So trade policies and trade deficit. So when you look at Uganda as a country, first of all, we need to ask ourselves that before we even look at the trade deficit, who is getting into some of these trade policies for Ugandans, okay? What kind of people are discussing for Uganda? You literally see that it's just an open, it's like a discussion of going to have a conversation on this and that, but there are no clear interests that are made for the Ugandans. And when you look, I would want to discuss on the policies, for example, the one which was made for coffee. We also, the injustices that were identified by the local people. It is the first time that Parliament can be credited for getting into a contract which does not help the common man down. And a good reaction was brought up by the common man. You ask yourself one reason. Why can't the Bugisu Cooperative Union be refurbished so that it can provide employment for some people? Now, let's come back to the trade deficit. When you talk about trade, you should be having at least a product which actually in the reciprocal, you should receive money in the long run. Now, what does Uganda have to trade in the long run? Uganda trades raw materials or raw products in the sense. Of course, there are those that are processed in one way or the other. I am not giving a benefit of doubt to that. So in that sense, when we go to the international market, I mean, the prices are determined by the international market. Or We could say foreigners or the international friends that we have. And on the other hand, we are still under the disguise of neocolonialism up to today. We still sign contracts and they're like, you need to do this, and if you don't do this, the money is going to go away. The current budget, 58% of the budget is going to be borrowed money. I mean, 58%, and I mean, we are going to engage in trade in the financial year. So you clearly see that a trade deficit is definitely going to continue. I mean, another thing, just to mention, I'm sorry for invading in the rights of the moderator, the budget has 6 billion as money to take care of interests received. We still have a problem. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Ogutu. Mr. Ngabirano.
Thank you very much, the moderator and my fellow panelists. But this is just a quick one to Mr. Garang, that we as Uganda, we have the public salary structure. If you are a high school teacher, you don't expect to earn the same amount as an MP. If you are U5, you cannot earn the same amount as M3. So the salary structures are there and well stated for public office, but then the government cannot justify the money they can give, the salaries a private entity can pay, because some of these entities have to wait for profits in order to justify their salaries. Moving forward to the question posed to me by the moderator, what are Uganda's trade policies? Now, funny enough, we have the internal and external trade policies that we are affiliated to. I want to just mention 2 or 3. Now, the internal trade policies, and I want to focus on those that affected Omuntu Wawansi, that is a common Ugandan. That is the sugarcane. Now, the sugarcane policy, I think of around 2008, made us Ugandan farmers at the lower level have to sell our sugarcane to a middleman at a lower price, who would in turn sell this sugarcane at a much and abnormal profit to the end use, to the companies. Now, these policies incorporate in parties, and so did the coffee policy of around 2006, if I'm to be guided. That was the first coffee policy. You got to realize that these policies incorporated middlemen, and these middlemen are private entities that are not well regulated and well guided at the end of the day. Now, my brother, Mr. Ogutu Titus, said that 50% of the budget is burned. Yes, we can justify that by also saying that also, I think 17.7 billion of that very budget is to clear debt. Now, we as a nation do not have the capacity to accommodate 100% of our budget. The faster you understand your economic stand, the faster you live and abide by it. Now, the trade deficit, I want us to understand the definition of trade. Trade is the selling and buying of goods, and I stand to be corrected. Now, we as a country, what do we sell and what do we buy? Are the things we buy priority? Are the things we buy as a nation really, really necessary? Because you ask yourself the question, we don't have oil, we have to buy the oil. And the things we are selling, the reason why we are having this trade deficit is because of one major reason. The quality of the products released by our Ugandan market are so under par that some of these products cannot compete favorably on the job market. And this is just like a hint that I think we should note down. Yes, the international market justifies prices, but the price of a fish, the gallbladder on the international market is 1.5, but the Ugandan market is 800,000. Why is it that way? Ask yourself the question. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Ngabirano. We'll go to Mr. Mutungisa to tell us about your knowledge of trade policies and why you think we have a permanent trade deficit.
Thank you so much. So I think trade policy comes in 2 aspects. 1, locally. 2, can be global, can be regional. The whole point is that trade policy is never just about one country. It also has to bring in other factors. Why that is important then is, in terms of trade policy also, it's important that when you bring in other factors than other countries, the issue of integration and how interconnected you are matters. That is why so far, you can travel, for instance, the travel documents our government has through the negotiations, I think, of the former Minister of Trade. I think it was Mr. Chambade. You know, so you're able to travel to COMESA, able to travel to East African community without need for visa. That's first stage. Sorry. Yeah, so that's very important. Why that's very important as a trade policy is that then you're able to have larger market access, which is critical. However, now that larger market access cannot be that important if you have no product you bring to the table. It's more like when you just go in and you just, yes, you have the access in there, because even those COMESA countries, for instance, also have the same access to us. So in most cases, one who has the best products that perhaps have the biggest value sort of addition will most likely benefit from that sort of an integrated kind of an economy. That's why then it's very important and critical that we develop the quality of the products we have to start with, but also vis-a-vis the kind of demand they have from that global setting. But also in that particular, there's a very specific component that the government itself has a role to which it must walk the talk. So the extent that you don't tell people that buy, for instance, Bubu, buy Uganda, build Uganda, when you as the government yourself, you're importing things and everything you do, even starting from the basic furniture. So to that extent, there is no incentive for me to even develop a good product, a good chair here, because I know you want to go anywhere. Even like my own government can't buy it, then what makes me think that the COMESA, other governments within the COMESA, when within that, global perspective are going to buy the same. So that's why it's that deep-seated that the trade policies, whereas we can exist and have instruments and discuss them, we ought also look at what we bring to the market and also those sort of regional dynamics. Thank you.
Finally, we'll have Mr. Garang.
Thank you once again. So, at the end of the day, whatever policy, because there's a plethora of policies, trade policies, but at the end of the day, the policies are aimed for two basic reasons. One of them is to increase exportation so that you have a competitive balance of payment position. Then second is to increase on FDIs, or foreign direct investments, within Uganda. Then at the end of the day, with these two principles, whatever policy would zero down to these two. So I'll tell you why these two policies in the context of Uganda are problematic, and why then, if we want to progress, we should improve them. Then first, on increase of exportation, you must be able to then have an internally built industrial context within which goods are produced, like Edgar argued. If you can't exist in the context where if you have nothing to sell, so there must be an industrial base where things are produced, then they can then be sold, then for you to then have a favorable balance of payment position. That does not exist. Secondly, Uganda claims to actually create an environment for FDIs, but an authoritarian environment that restricts movement and access to things like internet does not promote FDIs, and that then again, it becomes hard for Uganda to have what to sell. On the second part, the persistent trade deficit. One, there are weak policies that incentivize local manufacturing, like I talked about. There are no policies that are intentional in place in making sure that the local industrial base is developed to then produce goods that then can be sold for you to have a favorable balance of payment position at the global context. The second thing is there is a very open inlet policy that allows all goods to then come into the economy to then outcompete the local goods. So if all goods can come into the economy of Uganda, the 47 million Ugandans then are able to buy phones from China. So whatever industry in Uganda that would then venture into the same thing has already by default been outcompeted and cannot even stand up to compete in that context. So there should be policies that limit how many goods come into Uganda so that the industrial situation can then develop. Again, finally, necessity is what creates innovation. So if it is not necessary to make Ugandans innovate, then they will keep buying iPhones and we cannot produce our own phones. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Garang. I would definitely love to see the day when Uganda is able to make iPhones. It would be good if we could start by being able to make our own toothpicks, though, because I think we're still importing those from China, if I'm not mistaken. So maybe we start with the toothpicks. That would be a good place to start before we can think about iPhones. Right, next question. And again, I'll reduce the time a little bit just to put you under pressure, make sure that you have your brain switched on. So I'm going to cut your time to 1.5 minutes because I also want you to be able to go through my questions and then open it up to the rest of our house audience to ask you some questions because they do have some for you. The next question for me is about something that was mentioned by one of you, an announcement or pronouncement that has been made recently by our president, the fact that Uganda now is a middle-income country. Do you believe that? Is that a premature pronouncement? What's your take on that? In 1.5 minutes, we'll follow the same order, Mr. Ogutu, Mr. Mutungisa, Mr. Ngabirano, Mr. Mutungisa, and then finally, Mr. Garang. So, Mr. Garang, starting with Mr. Ogutu, are we a middle-income country? Well, we have been pronounced as a middle-income country. Do you agree? And if not, why not?
Thank you so much for that question. A middle-income country, no. The reason is that we are a middle-income country for the international guys to see that, yes, we are. But internally, deep down to the rural man, we are not. And even if to answer the president, let me look to the camera, for how long can we sustain that comment for 2 years? Because that's what the World Trade Organization says, that if we are a middle-income country, we should be able to sustain the same figures for 2 years. Thank you so much.
On point, thank you very much. We'll move on to you, Mr. Ngabirano. Have we prematurely announced middle income status? What are your thoughts on that?
Yes, thank you very much, moderator, and to my fellow panel for being very engaging. First and foremost, there is what they call a hypothesis and then reality. Now, I can come here and say, I have a PhD, but then the question is, it will now zero down to a person out there to ask where, when, and how. Now, when the president comes and tells us that we have attained middle income status, you as a citizen of the Republic of Uganda, do you really feel that, be it statistically, be it economically, be it even politically, though it's not even an aspect of middle income status, have we really reached there? Have we really attained middle income status? And definitely the answer is no. The funny bit about His Excellency's report is that prior, 1 week earlier, the New Vision stated and gave us a detailed explanation of the current economic status quo of Uganda and stated that we have a long way. Even as the target of 2026 was set that we shall attain middle income status in 2026, we shall not be able to attain middle income status by 2026. Therefore, I pose the question to the legislators and also His Excellency that, yes, the possibility of attaining middle income status is there, but then to zero down to the right governance, the right policy implementation, because some of the policies we have as a country on paper are very beautiful and very attainable, but then the aspect of implementation makes some of the policies that we intend to put in place not be achievable at the end of the day. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Mr. Mutungisa is up next. Have we prematurely announced middle income status as a country?
Okay, thank you so much. I think I would have bought that argument if she was coming from a trustable person. So, but for this, I will not take that stance, and for a very plain reason. Simple. So when thinking about the middle income status, a lot of panelists noted, we look at sustainability. We look at the sustainability. We have a country where previously we had a debt of almost 60 trillion something for the budget. Now the debt has increased. And that budget, in the previous budget, they had also put money to finance that debt in a way. So we live in a country where we do not have any audit of the previous budgets, but we simply read more and more budgets, just for the sake of figures. And beyond that, our tax, the debt burden continues to increase. I don't think a middle income country supposed to be described by sustainability, but now instead the debt is increasing, and those so many issues then qualifies as one. That would be a very big lie. But secondly, you can't be that sustainable when you don't have the basics of reserves. Again, they say we do have them, but then you wonder, then what if we really do have those reserves? Why would that scenario here at Malaba border take us all that long? But also the importance of these reserves, especially in the context of rising prices, is very important, because even the US itself, whereas it lies globally, largely on things like petroleum products, they have reserves that can last them 50 years of oil in the US. Here, here for Uganda, I can't tell, but from the experience we had just for that Malaba saga, it seems we don't have any. So a country that then can say we are middle income ought to have such structures in place, that even if there was a drought, Uganda can push itself for 3 years because it has food reserves. That even if the prices globally of oil, increased, that Uganda, because of its reserves, they have enough oil to take them for 5 years. Then that would say, yeah, we are getting stable and perhaps we're in the middle income. Without all those indicators, that man is lying.
I must put on the record for the camera that those views are those of Mr. Mutungisa and not mine or CCG for that matter. My underwear is not metallic, so yeah. Let's move on. Finally, we'll hear from Mr. Garang to tell us if you think indeed middle income status pronouncement has been premature by the government.
Okay, so the short answer is we are not yet a middle-income economy. And the long answer is this. Like Edgar just argued, in addition to what Edgar said, there are some critical things that then serve as indicators for its status, whether middle or first or whatever status it is. So in the context of middle income status, as the president pronounced, I think it is important to agree with Edgar that the pronouncement should not be an autonomous prerequisite to decide when to do that. I think it should depend on the indicators. One, we are still struggling with infrastructural related problems. For example, Uganda, as we speak, doesn't have a standard modern railway. We have existed for close to 60 years, but we don't have that in place. We have one international airport. Again, like what happened at Malaba is still a challenge that we face. And then you cannot stand and argue that we are a middle-income country. The second thing is our industrial base. If you looked at the rise of countries like Japan, Brazil, and Korea's after the rise of Europe and America, after the world wars and the industrial revolution, the rise of these countries was premised on pure industrialization. And these countries, for example, companies like the Philips and the the Toyota companies spearheaded the development of countries like Japan. So if a country like Uganda doesn't have any industrial base for something that makes them compete in the global context, and then you cannot stand and tell us that you are a middle-income country. Then another thing is the standards of living. Ladies and gentlemen, like someone said, if the standards of living are still as bad as they are, then we cannot argue that we are a middle-income country. So it is not good to be illusional. We need to face these realities and improve. Thank you.
Thank you very much. You reminded me of a story I was reading actually this week. There's a small country, well, it's not even, depending on who you listen to, it's a country or not, called Taiwan, which if it went under, the entire world would come to an entire standstill because half the chips in the entire world come from that very small island. And so because of that, they are so important that no one can even say anything bad about them from either side. They are that important. So just an interesting fact there. Right, let me ask one more question and then I will open it up to the House to ask our panelists some questions as well. We know that education is key for any country, and that this is something that most civilizations will hinge their development on, especially for development. In terms of your assessment of education in Uganda, how do you think we can be able to attain educational justice in Uganda, if there is none? I'll repeat that question for you. Having education as an equalizer for balanced development, how do you think we can be able to attain educational justice in Uganda? Start with you, Mr. Ogutu, same order, then Mr. Ngabirano, Mr. Mutungisa, and Mr. Garang. And then we'll hand over to the House to ask you some questions as well.
Thank you so much once again. So education is something important for everyone, and that translates into the kind of contracts that this country gets into as well. Because without a good education, you can't be able to contract with other people that claim to be with better technologies or advanced in terms of equipment. Now, when you look at the structure of Uganda's education system, it concentrates more on passing out students, if I'm to lower it down. It doesn't look at the nature of product that is coming out, but it looks at, has the child finished? For example, you look at the USCE programs which are put in place. The president was complaining of recent in his speech, but I mean, education is now expensive in one way or the other, and probably is one of the reasons why it is expensive. So education is important in the sense that it broadens on the sense of knowledge for a person to participate in. So when we look at our institutions as well, we need to look at what is being given to the students. Can it transform the society as well in terms of economics, in terms of politics, in terms of socially? Because in one way or the other, that's how we are going to see industries coming up. In one way or the other, that's how we are going to get innovators coming in place, and etc., etc. So in one way or the other, education is important, but the structural differences that exist today make it so hard for people to come out as elite products. I don't say that we do not have elite products. I mean, you can see from the panel. Thank you so much.
Talk about blowing your own horn. But yeah, big hand clap.
The same people who enslaved us anyways. So we cannot trust it that it will match up the standards. Whatever that means, that we need to have an education system that is largely influenced by our own factors here. One that solves the problems that are within this society. So for instance, when you understand that you have issues of stroke in a country, then you start developing things like stroke detection mechanisms, as in the earlier discussions, we had discussed. But beyond that, we also need to look at the issue of access, as we had argued in the morning for the rights, so that for us to have educational justice, as justice demands, then there should be some form of access, that everyone can access it. So that means also need to think in the future. If the idea then is that you are going for the fourth industrial revolution, then the question is how prepared are we to that extent that we can have our kids compete in that digital sort of education. Very important, but also not forgetting the question of gender mainstreaming, because justice has involved everyone. That's like how the second motion for the debate was. So there are very many facets of to look up, but yeah, briefly.
Thank you very much. Finally, Mr. Garang, to come and tackle this particular question as well, and then we'll open questions up to the House, and I'll give you some basic instructions on how we're going to do that in just a moment.
So, educational justice. I think the most basic of the term, educational justice, is if we are able to give everybody equal access to education and then be rewarded at the same level for the same education they have acquired, we shall have attained educational justice. Now, why isn't that happening in the status quo? Two things. One, education has been greatly commodified. That it is a transactional commodity that you can actually craft and sell to those who can afford it, then they buy it at exorbitant prices, like the cost of university education in Uganda, we all can attest. The student from the Ugandan Christian University, without any form of malice, can attest to this, and many other private universities. So that alone has to first, we need to decommodify education so that people can access education. The other thing is, at a time when many people cannot afford education because it is expensive, but can actually acquire skills that would be taught in a university context or a school context, why wouldn't we accredit those people? And this is a very unique aspect. Self-education needs to be appreciated, ladies and gentlemen. If I can go to YouTube and learn how to code, if I can go to YouTube and learn how to cook, why do I need to go to a university? And because of that, I have simply learned my skills through other methods, and I haven't gone to a university to acquire a degree, but I have these skills. Why wouldn't I be accredited to be able to practice the knowledge that I have acquired? If these people cannot be allowed to do that, we are not being just to them in the context of educational justice. So the argument is educational justice must appreciate the progressive nature of access to education, that even if I don't go to a university, but I can acquire legal skills in public libraries and buying private books, then I should be accredited and be able to practice law. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Garang. I would dare put it to you that Dr. Kamunyu might have an issue with that, because how do you measure that you've actually studied anything on YouTube, right? It becomes a bit of a challenge, I think, but maybe something worth thinking about, because I have learned a few things on YouTube. I can now boil eggs perfectly well. True story, I actually didn't know how to boil eggs. I had to go to YouTube to learn. True story. So I should be able to get certification for that, amongst many other things. Let's give a very big hand clap to panelists so far. I will only speak for myself in saying that if every 20 to 24-year-old speaks and thinks the way you do, then this country does have a future. And I think that none of my judges will disagree with that. Unfortunately, I also I'm scared that I see a lot of your compatriots and the way they live their lives we need to empower you to go and mentor them a little bit. But we definitely, obviously, have hope. Which is why I want to give an opportunity to your peers now to get into this discussion. Before that, though, I did want to ask my three closest judges, to Joseph, to Brian, and to Doctor, if you just don't mind me intruding, especially on this particular question, because it triggered something in my mind. I would just like to know, what primary school did you go to and where is it? St. Joseph's in Nagongera. Does it still exist? Okay. Except... No Division 1. What did you get in P7? Yeah, do you remember your grade at the time? Yeah. I was the best in the district. Best in the district. We shall take you at your word. Yeah. And the third best in the sub-region. Third best in the sub-region. Among the best 10 in Mwiri. Sitting with the best people in Uganda. Right. No, not... Not anymore. Mr. Chanwat, what primary school did you go to? And it's okay, we still want to know what primary school you went to. I went to St. Francis Primary School. Where is that? The one in Tinda. Oh, the one in Tinda. Hey, for you are rich, mama. That's a very posh school, yeah? Doctor, what primary school, how did you perform? Division 1. Congratulations to you. Dr. Devs, what primary school did you go to? It's on the slopes of the mountain. slopes of a mountain in Shema, between Buweju and Shema, which at the time I'm sure was Bushenyi district as one district at the time. No grade 1 now. What school is it? What's the name of the school? Dr. Deus will assure us he was the best. What's the name of the school?
It is called St. Claret Primary School.
St. Nyabwina Model Primary School. Yeah, so it's changed. Right. So I should.
But it was the best.
It was the best. Right. So, first of all, I should point out that my father used to berate me. I used to be very good at math. I was top of my class from when I was in P1 until P7. If I came second, I would cry and be disappointed. And so I used to be clever. I'm not sure if that has still remained the same, but I used to be very clever. My dad used to berate me for not doing too well in math. You know, if I got a 75, he would be unhappy because he knew I could get a 100. And he would keep saying, I used to be top of my class, I was best. One day, accidentally, my mother was sifting through some things and I got his certificates, and he had never gotten anything better than a C6 in math. So I'm just saying that we shall take Joseph and Doctor's word that you are the best in your class. At your word, we shall believe that you're not, we don't have to check with your neighbor, we'll trust you. But he is the reason why I asked this question in context of our discussion around justice in education. Where Joseph comes from, where Dr. Deus comes from, wherever you went, you had an equal opportunity to be able to be something of substance in this country. If that is the case or not anymore is a whole different question, and therefore begs for you guys who are the next generation of leaders for this country to keep that at the back of your mind in terms of, and it's why we ask these questions, when you become MPs, because I believe every single person in this room, my expectation is that you should be in Parliament in the next 10 to 15 years. If you're not, we will be very disappointed. And that when you go, what are you going to do to make sure that this school in Nagongera and Nyawina can still produce the next Dr. Deus, in a few years to come, right? So onus is on you, challenge thrown. We wait to see what you're going to do with that. Okay, so let's open up the floor to questions from you. I see one hand is already up. You'll need to hold up your card, and then what we will do, you'll need to find a card, and then we will have, I will actually come to you because my microphone seems to be the only one which is working perfectly well. You will have no more than 40 seconds to ask your question, and you can direct your question to any of our panelists in particular. We'll take as many as we can before we allow the judges to deliberate and give us a winner. I know we are not too okay on time, and I'd like us, in the spirit of our mission and vision, to be able to keep time. So I will be systematic in terms of following the order. I will start from here and then come back to you. Make sure you have a card, you put it up if you want to ask any question, and then you can direct it to any of our panelists. You have 40 seconds to ask your question, and then I'll ask all the panelists to take note of any questions that are pointed in your way. We will take all the questions at once, and then you'll get an opportunity to respond to all of them. I hope that's clear. Thank you very much. We'll start here. Please don't forget to tell us your name, where you're studying, and then, of course, your question.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Semya Arthur from Uganda University in Kozi. I only have one question to all our panelists. David Mpanga, in his book, The Politics of Common Sense, he once said that the best, or the way that has brought out of economic inequalities in Uganda is that there is a lot of self-sufficiency within government officials. How best can we solve this problem? Thank you.
If the question is not clear, please make sure you point out to us so we can get that re-asked or clarified for you.
Yes, good afternoon. I'm representing Uganda University in Kozi. My question goes to Edgar. in his assertions, he said that ministers sign agreements by mistake. So what agreements have been signed by mistake by ministers?
This is where you get to eat your words. Let's come over here and then we'll come to you.
Thank you very much. I'm Mugisha Eko, Cavendish University. My question, I didn't want to specify, but I think I'll go with Edgar. It's in regards to aid. In her book, Dead Aid, and Ms. Amoyo states that rather Africa has received over 1 trillion for the last 50 years, but the aid has not been able to effect or to lead to economic development and poverty reduction. It has been rather a sine qua non of corruption. What is your take? And in regards to economic development and democracy, I think this will go to Resta. Which one precedes the other, economic development or democracy? And you can answer that in regards to the USA, which is democratic, and China. As well as in Africa, I take an example of Rwanda. Rwanda is being commended as being one of the fastest growing economically, but is it democratic? So democracy and economic development, what precedes the other? Thank you very much.
Thank you. That was a lot more than 45 seconds. Just saying, but it's good to know. I'm hearing from the people who are asking questions, they are quoting books. It's very encouraging to hear that you guys are reading books. And you should clap for yourselves for that. That's a very good thing. Right, let's go here and then we'll head back that direction.
Thank you so much. The economy of Uganda, which way? One of the pertinent issues today in the economy of Uganda is inflation. I would like to ask the panelists, how should we go about the solutions to the rising commodity prices right now? Are you in for the subsidies, or you also believe we shouldn't put money in we should rather put money in production, not consumption? Thank you.
All right, thank you so much. My name is Harold from Nkumba University. So my question goes to all the panelists. The budget is drawn by the help of the Minister of Finance. The same minister is appointed by the same president. So the president has say on who becomes the Minister of Finance and who he wishes to resolve at the end of the day, to dissolve, right? But then again, the system of separation of powers or checks and balances has still failed to check on the powers of the president vis-a-vis his ministers and the parliament. And the same president has so many seats within the parliament and he has monopoly over that. So all this in turn affects our economy, and if we want a change, let's say a change of politics to solve such problems, and if the man in power wants to become big-headed, he can still be big-headed. How do we solve such a problem? Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. My name is Abdul. My question to the panelists is this. Would you appraise the Entebbe Expressway in terms of economic merit to the country? Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. So my name is Benson C. Mayanja from Makerere University. Just 2 points to put across. The first one is really that any debate on economics should be fundamentally grounded in principles of economics. That is why many of the suggestions that are being made have no economic feasibility. And I think that's the challenge that we have with many of the suggestions made. Now, the second point, which of course is generic, but I think Ogutu may best respond to this question. The concept of budgetary prioritization. There are two key concepts that are related, allocative efficiency and technical efficiency. Allocative efficiency essentially means that the aspects that you are directing money to are enabling the economy grow, which is the fundamental principle of of budgetary prioritization. Technical efficiency is to ensure that each lease of money that you make acquires the maximum output. So what then is your suggestion in regard to change of government? How does it specifically address the technical aspects? Because if you don't understand the technical aspects, all the solutions that were being given are simply being blown out of the water and will not solve the problem. Thank you.
Thank you very much. You are very smart. I think Mr. Ocheno would like the color of your tie. I don't know if you had a chance to see it. You already saw it. Oh, obviously. I would think you would have already seen it.
Nakulima Denise Madrin from Mbarara University of Science and Technology, doing biomedical engineering. So my question goes to Titus. Titus mentioned a couple of things here, and Titus, KIU. So he mentioned a couple of things here that left me quite disturbed. So I want you to know that Uganda's economy is characterized by contributors where we have the formal and the informal sector, which has been worsened by COVID, where we have more people from the formal sector going into the informal sector. But then when a probable solution like the night economy was suggested to you, you shunned it down. What characterizes the night economy? We have people like the Bodabi riders, we have the Bufundas where you can get food anytime. Because I want you to know that the needs we need at night are not exclusive to daytime. These needs can cut across. So what hinders us from tapping into the potential night economy, yet it can give us a lot of results with the large numbers that we have of the youth that are unemployed and can't be catered by the formal sector?
So I hope that's been noted. Okay, so we'll finish with 1 and then 2, and then we'll go back to the panelists.
Thank you so much. Once again, I'm Ricky Mugume Kashija, physiotherapist from Mbarara University of Science and Technology. I think I should give a small status quo. We've seen the COVID, we've seen the locusts, and we've also seen the price changes that are very detrimental. And the debate has majorly focused on the ideas of the economy at large and the people who are benefiting and those who are not benefiting. One that has not come up is the issue of the gap between the rich and the poor, which grows bigger and bigger every day. Personally, I would support the president in saying that this is a middle-income status country because he sees the people who are making it in life, and the checks and balances will count for him without looking at the people who are down, suffering. Because one has said, I think one of the panelists talked about the idea that the average Ugandan lives below the dollar. So my question is, and this goes to Mr. Garang Lester, the gap between the rich and the poor, how does this affect the revenue base of this country? Thank you.
Thank you. We had one more, I think, here.
Thank you very much. My question goes to all the panelists. After the 1920 to the 1956 wars that happened, when the Asian tigers went back to their nations, they were experiencing high levels of illiteracy and extremely high levels of poverty. Now, what the 4 Asian tigers decided, they came up with 5 key policies to uplift their economy. They came up with policies such as investment in infrastructure, government support, among others. And what they did, for all that to be a success, their focus was any corrupt official, they carried out draconian measures on seeing that the policies that they put in place was a success. Now, my question goes to all the panelists. As Uganda, our major issue or our major disease in this current government is corruption. Would you suggest that we also need to come up with draconian measures to see that we move to a better nation as young people?
Thank you very much for these questions. So we'll hand them now back to panelists. I'll give each of you, the last question. The last question, if I can rephrase for you, I think it was about the issue of corruption being a problem for us. And do we need draconian measures? Do we need dictators to, right? Ricky, your question was, again, just to clarify? The gap between the rich and the poor and how it affects revenue generation or collection. Revenue generation and collection for us as an economy. I'll give each of panelists 3 minutes to respond to all the questions that have been asked. We'll go in order, starting from here to there. And I think for this, you can actually stay seated and be comfortable while the judges deliberate. And then after you're done, we'll take a 2-minute break and then get to find out who our champion for the day is.
Thank you so much. So, governance is not a one-man thing. Governance is a team of so many people. A team that has experts, professionals, up to the man who is down in the rural areas of Kabale. So, when I made the statement, I specifically did not say change of government. I think that's what Benson was saying. My statement was, if we don't fix the politics, then we cannot fix the economics. Literally meaning that to have an environment for sustainable development, it should be a healthy environment. People should be able to move. People should be able to trade freely with little restrictions as per se. So politics is one factor that has been put in almost all sectors, and we miss the point at the end of the day. Just because you subscribe to the opposition, you're curtailed in this mindset that you did not, that you do not like the government. Whom does the chairman, the mayor, I don't know, the area Sukwago, his position, he works for government, literally, but the way he speaks, he puts them in line. So governance is a team of people. So without politicizing everything, I think we can have better results. That's what I meant. I did not specifically say that we need to have a government change from A up to Z. Anyway, since 1986, it is the same government. So on the night economy, I think my sister wants to defend your teammate. I understand your feeling. So the thing is simple. The thing is simple. How productive is the night economy going to be? Are you trying to suggest that border riding and bus functioning can actually solve so many problems of Uganda, like unemployment? Okay? Do you want everyone to go to bars? Do you want everybody to ride motorcycles? Why are we even in school? How do you expect a lawyer who doesn't have a job to go and ride? Well, he would do that to earn a living, but it's not necessary. And besides, you don't expect a man in Chikubo with his dress of 5,000 to be jumping in the night in the cold looking for money. Okay? So, I would want to correct that statement. Okay? I would want to correct that statement. So, the night economy might be an alternative, but Edgar did not explain it very well. Because he said, going to bars and riding border, that's what he mentioned. He did not go further on the sustainability of the night economy. And the economy of Uganda cannot be limited to night transactions. How about the day? Inflation. When we go back into history, 1978 French Revolution, one of the factors was prices going up, and Marie Antoinette is saying those who cannot afford bread, those who cannot afford that current time should afford bread, in the other way around. So what are we seeing right now? Not all solutions can be resolved by providing money. Some solutions happen organically with the transactions that happen within an economy. So currently, when you look at the inflation rates, I don't think the government of Uganda should just throw the parish development model to the people. I find it very, very not a right timing to find a solution to the current problem we have. Then there's a gentleman who spoke about self-sufficiency. So self-sufficiency, this can be translated into the organs of government as we see them. The expenditure is too high up there. We all know how much Parliament earns. We all know how much the judiciary spends on just putting on those wigs. A lot of money. We're talking about billions. We all know the money which goes unaccounted for. And we do not have answers at the end of the day. So, to correct my statement on the night economy, once again as I conclude, moderator, it is not a sustainable solution. It is not productive. And if we did a survey, I don't think 70% of Ugandans would agree. Because you need to consider other factors as well. We cannot just bump into people anything just because at the end of the day it's going to increase revenue, but it's not translating into the cost of living or the standard of living. Thank you.
Okay, thank you so much. I think for the other questions, let me first address the issue of night economy. I never expected that I would have to mention all businesses that can happen in the night. But the simple example is, for instance, banks normally here close at 6, at 5. What that 24/7 economy means, that those banks will be able to work up to morning. So how does it improve employment? That means if these banks were only employing 50 workers, now they will need 100 because some, while these ones go to sleep, some will have to work in the night. Now, how that happens, definitely, when you're working in the night economy, you're earning money. That means you're earning excess money enough to pay for that additional labor that you've put.
Can a bank employ 100 employees?
You had your time. If this was a bar conversation, I would have engaged, but it's not. So, yeah, so you know, so that's very important, yeah?
Yes,
so, please, this is not a bar. So, when talking about the night economy, it was very important to understand that. Now, let me go to the fundamental questions. Now, maybe just for proof, just maybe to enlighten you. So, the night economy, for instance, are currently in the UK. The UK is the 5th best country, the night economy. China and even Vietnam. Vietnam's growth as a country has improved by 32% because of the night economy. So I don't know what feasibility you're talking about. I could take you throughout the entire world to understand the night economy. So let me address the question of rising prices. So I think the question of rising prices, dear ladies and gentlemen, again, it's a question so much of structures. Because like I'd explained earlier, so if, for instance, if we had reserves of oil and sufficient reserves, the reason as to why, for instance, like the US economy can be able to resist any sort of economic shocks is because it has those reserves. So at any point, whether Russia perhaps continues the war, it can now exploit that oil and put it to usage. So whatever that means is that you need to check your dependence mechanism, right? That whereas you're operating in a global sort of world, you're able to have your own reserves, that in sort of calamities like drought, food shortage, etc., there are basic utilities that your people will still be able to have. That means there won't be need for you to raise prices because of scarcity. Simple economics, basic economics. Okay. So beyond that, I think there was another question about how, do we use the draconian? I mean the question of aid. That was the question that came to me. So I think aid has two issues. As the context of my speech was entirely, was that economic problems here are structural. The understanding of that and the importance of that is that structural problems are not solved by aid, right? It's more of a scenario of if you have a problem with your woman, the solution cannot be to marry more women, yeah? So if your structures, for whatever reason, whether they exploit workers, whether they do whatever, so there's no amount of aid that is enough for them to be put to great usage. So that's why the problem is supposed to be tackled from that level. But secondly, this aid does not come in that great, nice hope that you developed. In most cases, it is a mechanism to exacerbate the hegemony of different countries that give us that aid, for them to be able to put you into some unfair, to coerce you into some diplomatic deals that are in their interest. So there are very many factors, and it's why aid can't address our problems. Again, structure was a very great context, and it's why I was so much, singing over it throughout my submission. So I think that's where the issue is. Then I think there's also another challenge on how then do we suggest that we have draconian measures to address corruption. I think, yeah, that's true. I think we need these draconian measures because from history, we can be able to tell that we getting silent about them has instead resulted into more sorts of corruption because it creates a sense of impunity where people feel, anyway, Jim Moyes did it and he's now a minister. The other one did it and is now this. So I think there's some sort of that need for us to have that force. But then lastly, there was another very big question that I know if I don't address, then perhaps I would have to lose this debate entirely. The idea of which agreements were signed by mistake. There are very many. There is when the minister made a concession that the deals he negotiated in the one of the Entebbe airport were not okay, but anyways, he will be able to pay the debt. We come at one of the coffee agreement of Peneti. He made a concession that, he just signs. People bring documents to him. So he assumes that the other undersecretaries have already looked into them, So we have very many scenarios. I thought that was supposed to, guide you. So there are very many instances where those agreements, and that's why it was very important. But then, lastly, I think there was also an issue on would you approve the Entebbe Expressway and its form of operation? That question is a little tricky because there are some class of people that afford that and are doing it. But also you need to understand that when you are borrowing that money, the expectation was that one of the revenue mechanisms would be gotten from those sort of tolls. So now when we eradicate that which we hoped would give us that money, then that means we shall need more foreign debt to finance that loan. And again, we can't keep on cycles of debt, so we ought to find those obligations. Thank you.
Thank you. I'll begin from where Edgar just stopped on debts. In the recently read budget, 20.9 trillion shilling was budgeted for debt financing. So that means we spend so much money trying to get out of the debt trap, but we fail to do that. In his book, Confessions for an Economic Hitman, John Perkins explains how the developing world is trapped into the debt cobweb by the people that purportedly give us debt. So the sooner we got out of that trap, the better we can actually deal with the debt issue. Now let me answer the question that were shot at me and everybody here. First thing is the question on the income, on the wealth gap, or the difference between the rich and the poor, and how that affects revenue collection. You see, revenue collection on the principles of taxation does not actually really give so much about how much you earn, because you cannot be required to pay if you don't earn some form of money. Income tax and taxes on profits and so many other taxes. So if you don't earn some form of income, you most likely cannot be taxed. And that is why our collection of revenue is limited, because not many of us actually have income. So it is something we can argue differently from the wealth gap. But to appreciate the question is that wealth gap is a component of the economic indicators. So if many people, if the difference between the rich and the poor continuously grows, then there is a problem that needs to be solved. But ideally, the implications of that on revenue collection are enormous. But again, we need to appreciate that people who don't earn are not required to pay some form of tax. Secondly, inflation and how to solve it. Ladies and gentlemen, inflation is not the disease. Inflation is a symptom of a disease. And this whole conversation from that podium to where we are is what actually leads to inflation. So if you paid attention, then we have already suggested how to actually control inflation. Because, for example, if we produced so much of what we consume, then we will not be affected by the inflation that is foreign imported because of whatever is happening in Ukraine or the impact of COVID. Because we don't have that capacity, that is why we are affected by imported inflation, because we import a lot of goods. So we need to actually be sure that we cannot import inflation by making sure we have the things we need locally. Thirdly, economic development and democracy, which one precedes the other? This argument, or this question, assumes that economic development and democracy are mutually exclusive, which is totally a fallacy. Because it is not possible that you have to choose between democracy and economic development, and then you move for what you actually defend. My argument is rather that you cannot be purely democratic without some form of economic development. Then you cannot actually also achieve economic development in an authoritarian context. Or you can argue China, you can argue any other country, but again, at the end of the day, if there are no democratic principles in the economic policy decisions, then you will understand. For example, in China, there is an annual meeting of the Chinese People's Party and so many other groups of people that make decisions of the economy. That is some form of consensus building, which is an element of democracy, and that meeting has a component on how China's economy actually resultantly grows. So you can't argue that China has grown out of lack of democracy. Then fourthly, number 4 is the idea of the Entebbe Express. I would like to argue that the money spent on Entebbe Express was badly placed, because the bad placement is that I am going to draw some analogies. For example, if Entebbe Express would be directly implanted to be the Ginger Road, for example, we would cut a lot of cost. Because the amount of, the cost of time wasted in the traffic along Ginger Road, which is an industrialized area, would be solved if the express road was built here than wherever it is built. Because on average, the cars that use that really are few, and they don't have a lot of economic contribution. Then lastly, on corruption and the measures to control corruption. Corruption is an excuse. Corruption is a problem, but has been used as an excuse for some governmental inefficiency. In her book, The Chalk Doctrine, Naomi Klein argues that a whole chapter dedicated to blame corruption and explains how governments fail and then blame corruption. So the point is, there is no country that is purely not corrupt, but countries have developed albeit corruption. So what is the problem? The problem is that we have failed where we should have succeeded, and then we use corruption as a scapegoat. So my argument is, even if we solved corruption, we would still show the solution to corruption would simply expose our failures. So the point then is, can't we then develop albeit corruption? Because without development, corruption cannot succeed, because no one knows what corruption really looks like. So it is an evil, but we can actually use it as a stepping stone, rather not a scapegoat as it is being used in the present context. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you very much, fellow panelists, for the insightful discussions we have had as as far as we are concerned now. Some of the questions that were posed were self-sufficiency and how to solve the problem. Now, self-sufficiency is a point or factor that zeroes down to governance. If you cannot tell me that if the president is appointing the Minister of Finance, the Minister of Finance does not design the budget. It is the Ministry of Finance that designs the budget. After the Ministry of Finance designing the budget, it is Parliament that discusses the budget and approves and makes necessary adjustments and sees what should be priority and isn't priority. We as the end users in most cases implicate the Minister of Finance for being the head of the ministry that designed the budget. So, ladies and gentlemen, self-sufficiency at the end of the day is most of these ministers are meant to be vetted by Parliament. But in the context of Uganda as a nation, we overrule that context of vetting, that even deep down at university level, the guild president will appoint ministers, and the CGRC, the guild leaders will not approve them. So vetting is a disease that we have failed to approve that is necessary at the end of the day, and is very essential for us as a nation. Two, when you talk about inflation, as my fellow panelist Garang said, inflation is more of like, it's just a symptom of something that is already existent. If I give it into context, take an example of the current prices of commodities are rising due to other factors. Soap is not rising because soap has to rise. Soap is made using oil. That is a common fact that most of us should be knowing. Vaseline was 2,000 some time back. Currently, a small tin of Vaseline is 5,000. Now, the reason why some of these prices rise it's not because that probably the Ugandan currency has lost value or the inflation rate is high. It is generally because some of the factors or probably the effects of other problems in other nations are directly transferred to us as a nation because we do not have the capability to outsource some of these products at the end of the day. Three, when you talk about political power, someone raised the issue of political power, how someone has the capability and power to be able to adjust or have the power to govern what the say in. Yes, we acknowledge that us as a country, as Uganda, most of the decisions made at the end of the day are not governed by intuition or necessity, but in most cases, they are made in such a way to favor a few and neglect the majority. This is down to the political structures we have as a nation. Then the entire express highway, he explained it very, very well. When you ask yourself the question of need versus the need versus priority. Was it necessary to build an express highway? Two, the cost of a kilometer at the entire express highway, was it really valued enough for us to construct a road in that place? Now, the cost benefit of us building the new bridge was really necessary, as you can now see the dividends of us having a new bridge on the Ginger Road, as compared to us having an unused Entebbe Express Highway that we even actually pay toll fees for at the end of the day. Moving forward, corruption. Now, the funny bit about corruption is we either misunderstand the concept of corruption or we just use it as a scapegoat, as probably some of us, to point fingers at people in the offices of power. In most scenarios, you get realized that even us on the small scales, we are more corrupt than we tend to be. But then, people who govern public fund, we tend to point the finger depending on context. I'll give an example. If the ministry allocates $10 million for something, then the minister doesn't use the money accordingly. Yes, that is corruption. But then the question is has the money rightly been appropriated at the end of the day? Now, corruption is something that is either misunderstood by the general public or is used as a way of pointing fingers at the people in public offices and a form of defending our nitty-gritties at the end of the day. And finally, the economic gap between the rich and the poor. Now, the government does not provide sustainable structures to favor the majority of the source of economic development for the majority of the nation. That is farming, tourism, wildlife, and the rest of that. Now, if we can acknowledge and get structures for this scenario, we shall be able to at least narrow down on that economic gap between the rich, the middle income earners, and the very poor. I beg to submit.
Can I ask that we give our panelists a bigger hand clap than that? So I should point out, number one, on behalf of all Subaru drivers, please stop saying bad things about the expressway. Yeah, for us, we have a lot of value in it. The cost and other things are not our problem. We just know that it works for us very well. Mr. Garang, you talked about the fact that we don't know what corruption looks like. We actually do. There's something called the corruption curve. And it's at this point that I should point out very gladly that none of our judges seem to be corrupt in that sense, and so we appreciate the fact that there's no corruption in that regard. So what we're going to do now is we're going to hear from our judges. I'll give them a minute to just come and say something, give us a little bit of a brief of what they've liked about today, and inspire you, ladies and gentlemen, for a moment or two. And then after that, we'll hand out some tokens of appreciation to, I think, everyone actually, because the fact that you're here means that you're already in a very good place. And then after that, we'll find out who our big winners are today, which is, of course, the climax of our afternoon. So I'll ask Dr. Deus to set us off, and then we'll follow the order as it is to hear from our judges. Thank you.
Usually I come first with a little bit of bad manners. Because I feel I should be able to challenge you. Whether I am hard or not, it's a matter of time. We will probably see. Joe will talk about this in a little bit of detail, and I think it's very important because this is final, and for the benefit of everyone here, and Sarah also. First of all, I ask all of you to give a very, very loud hand of applause to this. One, they are very bright. That's number one. They are smart. They take on things. So we did well, Joseph, to select them up to this. Though I missed some in the background, my dear Mayanja and all, I would have loved you here also. But who knows, in future. They are smart. They are bright. They know it a bit. But like me and Joseph will tell you, and I don't know who thinks that's enough, they are lost. They are also lost at the same time. Because the question was the status of Uganda's economy, and it's not their fault. Joseph will tell you it's not your fault. I know we'll be happy, we'll clap for you, but from me, really, if you trust me, I hold a doctorate in philosophy. If you trust me, if you trust that I have the experience, the understanding, and that I have gathered knowledge over time, I have had experiences, I've read privately, and then you should accept that you're lost. Because what did I expect? I expected for you to first shape your worldview. I said it in the morning, and I will say it again. I expected you to shape your worldview first. And worldview, by the way, can literally be said by the globe and our world. And when you see closely, you realize that the world is divided between the left and the right. If you invent your own other things, I don't know. But clearly I see. If you belong to the center, maybe it means that the right or the left has given you a chance to shape your way. What do I mean? I see a capitalist world believing in individuals and self-determination and enterprise shaping economics and capital markets and etc. And that's championed by the United States. And you also need to understand their background. These guys arrived at New England with violence, and everyone arrived as an individual. So it made sense. If you wish to think deeply, that's one world, and it influences the entire West. The other world is a socialist world. And in that, the champions, the key guys who are also losing position recently, because I see they are also oligarchs everywhere, is China, is North Korea, is Cuba. And they believe that the state should have an iron hand and should control prices and decide on what people should eat and drink and distribute. You know, when I was listening, and I listen without sort of listening, you may think I'm not listening, I feel to draw you. I was sick. People fighting over a marwa pot. Africa is like a marwa pot. And let me tell you, my elders, it's true. It's like a marwa pot. Left, right, okay, you're safe. Every rambling. Smart people, meaning they are lost and they are more likely to be used as useful idiots. Smart people lost in the maze of bad politics. So where am I going? Leadership. Because what I'm talking about is clearly political economy. Leaders define. Leaders are determined to do it once in their lifetime and forever for the sake of their children and great-grandchildren. That's what leaders do. And what happens when they do it? Economists have found out, and they have condensed all these tools of analysis, and they have found out that when they do that, when leaders determine once to do this, whether socialist way or capitalist way, then truth and light comes for everyone. That it becomes a right of every one of us, and the attitude even of our leaders, to bring us to truth and light. And that no one will be arrested for saying that you purchased cars for speakers of parliament at 2.8 billion. That won't bother you, because it's the appropriate thing to do for us all to know that when all leaders do these things well, and that they wish everyone well, and that they wish us to have a foundation, truth and light. These are economists. They condense these things later. You go and read. That truth and light comes to every one of you. That it becomes your right to know the truth in broad daylight. Whether in socialism or socialist, because now we have what we call social democracy, social capitalism, practiced by the Scandinavian countries. Very good. Which means it's an in-between thing. It's a compromise position. And that the second one, that there will be beauty everywhere. That the northern bypass will not be a rallying point for politics anymore. It's what leaders must do. Better airports, good infrastructure, good cars, that people will enjoy these beautiful things. And there will be an situation. That's what economists say. This is not, I'm not preaching. This is the outcome of these hard economics. So I want you at the end of the day to feel, is this the truth? If it's not the truth, for sure, if it is the truth for only you but not your neighbor, then know that you are not doing well. You must go to work. They also say that when this is done very well, there is hope for everyone. That everyone wakes up every day and looks forward, whether you are working in a restaurant, whether you are working in a toilet, whether you have hope. You have hope to educate your child, and that because the system has made sure that the other side of education is also affordable, and that even if it's capitalism, they have also provided for those who may not afford, and that the system is balancing, that there is hope for everyone. If your family is hopeful and your neighbors is not, don't pretend. Don't be an idiot. It's not okay. It means let's admit and go to work. There's no point of debate. Economists have thrown light on this. And finally, when all is well, and for this is true, everyone is compassionate. The money you steal, your parents steal, your leaders steal, is sent here sometimes by genuinely compassionate people. Yes, they stole from us imperially, but some did not know, but they compassionately give. I was in a small town in Italy. I got an education there at some point called Assisi, and I was walking through the city, and there are points where you donate. It's in Italy. It's in the state of Umbria, Perugia. And an old woman was giving, and I saw old women coming religiously to give. Every other time they're coming to give. This is the money that finally comes to Caritas. I don't think these are the people who brought imperial. They don't even know imperialism. They are compassionate. They are deeply compassionate. So when good economics are played by our leaders and everyone at every level of society, including religious leaders, there's compassion everywhere. You don't force it. Now, let me leave you, because I am not about to talk about the details, the funny statistics. Now, my problem is this. Who is responsible for you, for us, for those you left back home? The ones you rarely think about because you are dramatized by your own needs. You think the state in which you are going to drop off. You are not hopeful. So you are all dramatized. And so even the reasoning is occupied by, you are all dramatized. And it's a normal day for you. Who is responsible for this? There are two people responsible. In this, one is a group of people, and the other is us. One are the imperial powers. It's a big subject. It's a big subject. Because they have needs and interests, and they know them clearly. They know they need raw materials cheaply because they have to have an advantage all the time. Now, the other person who is your leader, and because you choose your leader, is you and your leaders, because you have failed to find an appropriate mechanism based on your conditions, tactical as you can be, to stem the greedy imperialist. And so it comes back to us, our leaders, and ourselves. Because you cannot. The imperialists, once again, they know their interests. They know them very well. They want raw materials. Clearly, it's not very hard to keep an upper hand. And that's natural. Even in your villages, you don't want to lose your position in your village. It's natural. It's up to us. It's up to us, the leaders. Back to your title, and then I go. The status of Uganda's economy. Which way? I'm not going to be personal. When something is not properly structured, when something lacks premise, then it lacks good analysis, and it will have bad conclusions. So to me, you appeared very smart, like I see every day. But you are more likely to be part of the rambling of every day, like we have done, like they did. The Kwame Nkrumahs were clear. The Milton Obotes were clear. They understood the things. The Nyereres were clear. They understood the things. But if we don't go back, Sarah, if we do not call these young people to start shaping them beyond these rhetorical debates, which are not properly premised, we will not have great impact on our nations and into the future. I thank you.
Wow. Congratulations, comrades. I think at my age, being a youth like you, I must say I'm impressed. I'm not disputing Comrade Deus's submission, but Dr. Deus, this is a competition. We needed a winner. They had to do whatever it takes. So I must say thank you very much for putting up such a spirited fight. I am very happy with the judges for having made the right decision from the first group to the second group, and here we are. The quality of debate, the demeanor, the comradeship, the parting of shoulders of the four of you is amazing. I must say you guys have done a good job. I'm not going to say much. Joseph will come and say details. But from me, on my end, I'm very impressed. But I need to ask you one question. Why did you have to do this to us? This was a tight race. Tight. For the first time, I think Deus was very close to me and he said, these children. Or he may say his children, but me, I'll say my brothers. Wow. So thank you very much for putting up such a good fight. I know the preparation might have not been sufficient in terms of time. You also didn't know whether you would make it to the finals. So you had to prepare. But one of the key things I observed was all the four had their eyes on the prize. But I want to tell you, you're all winners. Thank you very much, and good luck to the winner. And we look forward to engaging more. Go on, shape your career. Debate is the way to go. You will eventually get somewhere. Our parliament is expanding day and night. So you could be number 594. Yeah. Yeah. So thank you very much. You have a great day.
This was extremely deliberate gender sensitivity, knowing very well that we're doing very badly. So we thought we would leave it to our sisters to give the latter elements of the remarks. But Sarah promised, as we all do, that in future we'll do what we're attempting to do to make sure that the panel of judges is as equitable and representative as hopefully will be the case at universities, that we encourage female participants. And just as my Sunday column suggests this coming Sunday, that perhaps we even give 0.0%, this is not corruption, of a point to female panelists to make sure that they actually qualify. And then when you're qualifying, by the way, this is, by the way, it's just come to my mind now, to my spirit, it's very serious. If there is a particular university engaging at early stages and you think that it might be of use for you to engage our time, do not hesitate actually to contact us, the panelists, or some other people, to try and guide you, to train you, to push you, so that by the time you're reaching a national competitive level, you're actually serious debating angels who are able to come and pick at the top tier of the prizes. Deus struck me a bit, so he sort of imposed a part of a conversation we're having earlier. It is absolutely true that you're fantastic guys. And by the way, you're genuinely absolutely fantastic guys. I am absolutely convinced that you plus your representatives here are top quality leaders in the next 5, 6, 7, 8 years. One of the things that Deus was just saying was that We absolutely want leaders who will be leaders. Leaders who will read real budgets. Leaders who will table budgets which are tested, well-researched, relevant, Ugandan, indigenous, gender-sensitive, and people-driven. Leaders who will stand up to some of the 23-year British guys who sit at the treasury, you know, to instruct our 45-year-old civil servant experts to influence. This is what we are talking about. Leaders who we hope will, if particularly they become the top national leaders when they go for conversations at IMF and World Bank, they put the Ugandan clause. I give you guys a thought. Try and Google Olaro Tunu in 1981. He was 32 and was president of the UN General Assembly. It was going around the other day. You will see how the young man taunted the world. Think about it. Now, those are Ugandans. It happened, and it started from here. That is what we are talking about. But, paramount, because of time, in our first disappointments, I was making a submission in the other room that when you're starting a debate, just like when you're beginning an essay, context, definition of terms. So if, therefore, this topic, moreover it's a final, and we're discussing Uganda's economics, we expect the top four guys to start with the context in the broadest sense of the entirety of the economy. There was absolutely no reason why you did not mention and wouldn't mention the environment, for example. Now, there you're top-notch. So starting at the top, interrogation of economic systems. That was my first note at the beginning. It was clearly absent. You came into it. Interrogation of the economic systems. And so therefore, what is Deo saying? We were actually shocked that this debate was not taking an ideological route. You know, young Kaguta at 70s in 1968, 69, when they were going to Dar es Salaam, these guys were shouting, carrying China on their backs. You know, the others were shouting whether or not we should go together with Appetite South Africa. I was just thinking as I was coming out here, when I first met John Garang, de Mobio, may his soul rest in eternal peace, in London, this guy wowed me by the amount of substance, material the guy had about Kush, Africa, Africanness, content, context, and how you could see if there was this free South Sudan, free Sudan, the whole of Africa would be a new empire. The guy talked material, substance. Coincidentally, there's a Garang here. That is what we are talking about. In fact, sometimes that pushed me to think. Chris Hani, do you know who Chris Hani is? Chris Hani was the anti-apartheid activist, the Africa's line of war of African liberation in Southern Africa, the Ogutu Joko of South Africa, who was killed by the Boers in 1992. He was a soldier, but this guy was a radical leftist Africanist who believed the African economy of South Africa must belong to the majority of South African people. Ideological polity. Now, for me, at the early stages of my debate at high school, we were discussing the Sharpeville 6. Who knows about the Sharpeville 6? The Sharpeville 6. These are these guys who were massacred in 1976 in South Africa. So the top notch of university debaters at your level, these are the things. But those were, whereas it's about Sharpeville massacre, it was also about economics and politics together. So that's what really what Deos was saying. Anyway, Lester and Edgar talked about some of these things. So really what Deos again was saying, we expect you to have put this thing about the politics of the left, the politics of the right, if you want to simplify it in a conclusion. The politics of capitalism, the politics of socialism. This is a debate, but you've given a basic economics question. You know, this is what Deos was trying to say. The intervention of the state. You had a bit of an argument, but I expected someone at your level to say who is about big government and small government. where we talk about taxation as a way to perhaps draw the rebalance, the economy on the communities. We are talking about economic inequalities because even education inequality was one of that. So these are kind of the things that we're trying to talk about and we're expecting. Somebody talked about privatization, absolutely right. Somebody talked about SAP. Those are the things. But that's what they also were trying to, you started now talking about really the broader things. But at your level, because we genuinely believe you're our cream leaders, but we want you to structure many of these things as a conversation along those lines. I must say, however, though, that in talking about capitalism versus socialism, it is actually much more ideological than geographical structure. Because Mr. Saunders, Bernie Saunders, is by and large a socialist, a UPCist kind of stuff in America. My good friend Jeremy Corbyn in the British Labour Party, the made sure he was not prime minister, the world would have changed. I would rather he led the Republic of Uganda today. I'm not committing treason, but he's putting that in context. So the ideological politics we're talking about is that, well, whereas China is talking about this going slightly more to the capitalist end, there's no reason why Mr. Museveni, who actually sang these things with the Nabuderes in the early 60s, Rugunda left UPC because they thought we're not left-wing enough and things like that. I wonder what these guys think if they could hear themselves over 20, 30 years ago. Our worry is we want you to be those guys, the new Obotes. There is a must read. The four of you guys must read the Common Man's Chart. Just speak it as an economics blueprint. You must read it. And I encourage everybody here to do so. I was at a television conversation the other day, and somebody mentioned in passing, just giving a bit of myself credit, about UPC's National Development Plan of 1969. It really didn't strike me. Maybe those are some of the things that you need to pick. Not for political reasons, but as you embed and equip yourself strategically going forward. But that said, you guys, you've done fantastic jobs. Final things, though, I'll just jump a quick one. On education, I was quite surprised. Again, I think two of you guys had to come back to give justice to that. How can you talk about, what was the question, sorry? Sorry. Yeah? Education injustice, I mean, what is it? Sorry. How can we attain education justice in Uganda? You guys went round and round and round, you know? Quality of education, access, outcomes, impact. Give those headlines. I think two guys eventually came back and talked about it. I was a little surprised that he didn't do that. Final on trade. I think again we're saying it with those. Nobody mentioned World Trade Organization. At this level, there's no way you wouldn't. Taxation, regulations, import subsidies, industrialization, industrial base, agri, things like that. But anyway, time is bad. You guys have done fantastic jobs. My own hope is that as we think retrenchment in the future, no youth is ever going to be retrenched. And for that reason, we are hoping that at the top of this will be women, and the top of this will be you guys, the top of you are the youth. There are no other leaders, because really in Uganda today, again, there's no treason. There is no leader older than myself, so you can imagine. So since there's no leader older than myself, then you guys are the future. You must think, you must plan, you must work together, you must integrate, you must share numbers, you must compete, you must debate, you must organize, you must plan, and you must take back this economy, take back this country, take back this region, plan to take it to the direction in which we shall be discussing Uganda, South Africa, South Sudan together. I wish you guys very well.
Good evening, everyone. I just want to say that I agree with the judges, the rest of the judges. I want to agree that Well, I'm sure you've noticed that I came in the later half of the day. I unfortunately missed the earlier part of the day, but I am absolutely impressed with what I have seen and heard this afternoon. I want to agree that you're all quite confident, very confident in fact, very smart, quite analytical in some instances, and I think you were quite researched in some instances as well. I'm quite impressed. And I was sitting there thinking, if we had quite a few legislators doing half of what you do, half of the presentation you made here, I think would be very far as a country. So congratulations for that. I also want to say that I noticed that there were perhaps areas that you could, work a little harder on. One of the areas I thought you could do more on is just listen more attentively, listen to the questions. Where it talks about, I'll just give an example, where, let's say the question on income inequalities, I would encourage you in future to just look out for, underline those keywords that strike you. Is it just income we're talking about, or the inequalities? And if it is, then you begin to think more deeply around that. If it is about education, we're talking about justice, educational justice. So underline the justice, because education, we all know that education is important. But what about the justice element? So I just want to encourage you to just think more deeply, listen more carefully, and just try and interrogate some of those keywords a little more. I also want to say that I thought that you would, for example, just think about the organization that's hosting this debate, Center for Constitutional Governance. I would have expected you to also just dig a little deeper into issues like governance. And a few of you attempted to bring in issues of governance as some of the difficulties or challenges we have in the country. I think you could have taken a little more time to just understand, so what is governance and how does it affect all these issues that we're talking about? Similarly, and earlier one of the judges talked about equity, gender and equity. I would have expected you, if you read the vision of CCG, it talks about justice and equitable society with men and women at the center. If I just stop there, I would encourage you in future to also look at some of the reasons why we are, we are underdeveloped. Some of the inequalities that we're talking about, a lot of them arise from the gender injustices and the inequity that we have in our society. So dig a little deeper there. So why, for example, is it only the 4 young men up here? Why haven't we had, I know that earlier there was a young woman, and I think that was good. I think those are things you need to think about. One of you, I think it was Garang, referred to some structural issues within our society. And I think when you think about gender, don't just think, oh, it's the numbers, or it's the women in this, we have enough, 30%, that's enough, they're not as effective. Think about why those women are so few in number, why they're not effective, what are the structural things that inhibit them from being effective, for example. Why? And I was talking to the organizers, and they talked about the difficulty in getting women, come up in these debate spaces. I think we need to do more, like has already been said, but I think also as debaters, these are issues you can interrogate a little more, because we have been saying that you're the leaders, you're our future parliamentarians, you're going to be heading all these districts and different institutions. You might even just be field workers, but what kind of, mindset are you going in there with? So I'd really like to encourage you to think a little more about that. Finally, I want to say try to avoid generalizing. in some instances, you were making general statements, and I thought that you could really ground your arguments a little more. So I think that could benefit you. And just to say that for the next time you go out to debate, or the next time you have these competitions, or you just have debates in your institutions, just make it a point to pull one young woman with you. Identify one with potential, or one you can even build. Yeah? One you can build and work with that young woman, not in the way that a lot of men usually work with women, because we also know that these spaces are really sexualized. Yeah? The minute you think that you identify a young woman who is very competent, very interesting, very intelligent, then you think, oh, she could make a good wife for me. I'm not talking about that kind of walking. I'm talking about the professional walking where you say, you know what, you can do it. You're great. Let's go and learn together. So I really want to challenge you, and maybe everyone else in the room, but also maybe the organizers. Let's try and see how we can pull the young women more. I see heads nodding there. Young women, I see some of you are nodding. I would really have loved to. I think we all would have loved to see you in this space, on the platform up here, including the organizers. So maybe what you can do, I don't know, it's maybe a discussion that we can continue to have with the organizers and with the institutions. But if there are things that are stopping you, then we need to sort of like dig a little deeper and find what I talked about, the structural issues. Sometimes there is this glass ceiling. No one will see it, but you, the young woman, will see it. Yeah? We need to find ways of breaking the glass ceilings and just letting more women come out there. But I want to thank you all very much. I think you made a great performance. I want to thank all of you who participated earlier. I did not participate in the earlier discussion, but I think it was really, really good. So congratulations. You're all winners. I agree. You're all winners, including the ones that didn't quite make it here. Congratulations and thank you.
Thank you so much. I think what we will do before we find out who the big winner is, the big winners are, I'll ask Sarah to come and let's hand out the certificates. Damien, if you could kindly help so we can do that. I think as we wait for that, some very interesting things have been said by our judges and our elders, and I hope that we have taken note of them. I don't think it can be belabored enough, but I'll give you a very simple context. You use the example of Olaro Tunu. We have one that's even more recent than that. The head of the ANT party, General Muchamuntu, was an army commander before the age of 30, right? Who's 24? How old are you? 20, 24, 23, 27? So essentially in the next 2 years you should be an army commander, basing on, right? And the fact that you're called Garang means that, you know, yeah? Besige was Minister of Internal Affairs at 20 what? 27 or 28, I think. And so the point is this, ladies and gentlemen, you guys technically, essentially, for all intents and purposes, should be running this country within the next 5 years. Question is, are you ready? The Canadian Prime Minister, Trudeau, is 34? He's running one of the most important economies in the world. And he was 35, I think, or something like that. So, are you ready? Or are you just still on the vibe? Right? So what we'll do, I'm going to ask our judges to please kindly help us hand out some certificates. We'll start with Ms. Fatumata Toure to come and help us hand out the certificates for Group 1. If you can just give me the batch for, so we'll try and do them very, very quickly. The moment I read your name, please do come very quickly so we can give you this certificate. And you will take a quick picture, and of course, this is where your CV begins. Technically, this is the very last item on your CV. So when I do my CV, I put General Manager, Celeste Media, General Manager Kwese, consultant, what, and then at the very bottom, I should have something like this that says, this is where I started my journey as a leader. So we'll start with Group 2. Yes, Group 2. Starting with, I think this is Group 2. Yeah, so we'll start with Group 2. We'll start with Titus Ngabirano. You'll start in the middle. Damian will pass on the certificates. We'll make sure the paparazzi takes a quick photo. Oscar Amanya, please come. The moment you hear your name, please dash forward. Congratulations. The certificate reads, Certificate of Achievement is proudly awarded to Oscar for your outstanding performance in the InterUniversity Interface Debates up to level of a semi-finalist. This is for Titus Ogutu. Onen Drake Douglas. Please do come quickly, followed by Rachel Nalukake. And finally, Simon Luswata. Make sure you're smiling for the photo. In about 15 years' time, your children will want to see this. You don't want them saying, Daddy, where were you, Grumpy? This is Rachel Nalukake. And finally, Simon Luswata. Rachel, you need to come back because I have another certificate for you. This is for... oh, thank you very much, Jaja. We'll have Joseph hand this out. So starting with Rachel Nalokake, please do come back and receive your certificate from Mr. Ocheng. Ochen, I was thinking of a Daudi who looks like you actually, almost your twin. My apologies. Rachel, thank you very much. Congratulations. Namudu Sylvia. Sylvia Namudu. Followed by Ronald Natwera. This is Namudu Sylvia, followed by, this is Sylvia. And then Ronald is followed by Brian Aruho. Brian Aruho is followed by Miriam Lawoko. Miriam Lawoko is followed by Echo Mojisha. Echo Mojisha is followed by Iramu Alice Elizabeth. Elizabeth is followed by Titus Ngabirano, who is followed by Christine Namutosi. Christine Namutosi is followed by Paul Sempebwa. Paul Sempewa is followed by Harmony Uwera. Harmony Uwera is followed by Samari Mirembe. Harmony Uwera is not around. Okay, someone is receiving on their behalf. And then Samari Mirembe, she's not here, so we don't want him stealing our photo. Samari Mirembe is not here. Gideon Kalema. And then Fred Magala. This is Gideon. Oh, this is picking for Gideon. Okay, and summary. And then we have Fred Magala. Is Fred Magala here? Okay, one more for you. For picking for Fred. Okay, thank you. Okay, Annabelle is doing group 1. We'll have Brian Aruho. This is for our semi-finalists. Again, I know you might have been here already, so we'll try and do this very quickly. So please dash over. Jenna Chiyuba from IU in Mbale. Followed by Benson Mayanja from Makerere University. This is for Jenna. Benson Mayanja is followed by Edgar Mutungisa. That's after Benson. Benson, you'll exit on the other side so we can follow some order. And then after Benson, we have Edgar Mutungisa, who will be followed by Sam Baluku. Sam Baluku. This is Edgar Mutungisa, followed by Sam Baluku. And then finally, we have Lester Garang. And then we'll have Dr. Deus come and hand out the next batch, starting with Evelyn Mahoro. Thank you, Annabelle. Evelyn Mahoro, followed by Jenna Chiyuba. Jenna Chiyuba is followed by Godfrey Mutao. Godfrey Mutao is followed by Ivan Magomu. Okay. Ivan Magomu is here. If they are not here and someone can pick for them, please do. We'll do this quickly. This is Ivan, followed by Naomi Katshabe. Naomi Katshabe is followed by Kule Thaddeus Jude. Kule Thaddeus Jude is followed by Maureen Mikai. For Maureen, oh, Maureen is here. Sam Baluku, followed by Simon Luswata. This is Sam Baluku, followed by Simon Luswata, followed by Sam Nirinje. Sam Nirinje, followed by Rita Mirembe. This is for Simon. Okay. We have, is Sam here? Oh. Is Rita Mirembe? Yeah. Followed by, Rita is followed by Titus Ogutu, who will be followed by Tracy Narwada. Tracy Narwada is followed by Areva Jonathan. Areva Jonathan is followed by Joanita Ngabirano. Joanita Ngabirano will be followed by Edgar Mutungisa, who will be followed by Arthur Semuyaba. Edgar Mutungisa, followed by Arthur Semuyaba. Arthur is here. And the final ones will have Ahmed come to Shukri. Yeah, we called you Pamela Arian. It was a proper shock for me. I think Pamela, who has a back, that's a good one. So you're welcome. Please do come. And we'll start with Joan Orishava. Joan Orishava, if you'd please come. Followed by Ruth Chobutunji. Ruth Chobutunji, followed by Mercy Arindaje. Mercy Arindaje, please come quickly, followed by Mugume Ricky Kasheja. Ricky will be followed by Denise Madrin Nakulima. This is Mercy, followed by Ricky. Followed by Denise. Denise is followed by Lester Garang. This is from Ruth, followed by Lester Garang, who's followed by Victor Harold Sewanonda. Victor Harold Sewanonda, followed by Abdu Amanya. This is Victor Harold, followed by Abdu Amanya. Abdu is not here. We'll then have Onen Drake Douglas. Abdu is here? Okay. Onen Drake Douglas, followed by Sandra Nakasingo. Abdu, followed by Onen Drake Douglas, followed by Sandra Nakasingo, followed by Deborah Melissa Nasozi. Followed by Daniel Okiror Musinguzi. Is Deborah here? Followed by Daniel Okiror. This is a very interesting name. How are you Okiror and Musinguzi at the same time? You're trying to prepare just in case, whichever way it goes, you're safe. The parents are very clever. Yeah, you can be UPC, you can be NRM, you can be anything. Benson Mayanja. Please tell your parents they are very strategic. We appreciate them. Benson Mayanja, followed by Derek Baluku, followed by Peace Preta Namasaba, followed by Joan Orishava. Is Derek Baluku here? Peace Preta Namasaba. When you hear a name, please come quickly so we can try and run through this. We need to find out who our big winners are. This is Derek Baluku, followed by Peace Namasaba, followed by Joan Orishava, followed by Oscar Amanya. This is Peace. Joan, followed by Oscar Amanya, and then Prize Atusingwize. This is Oscar Amanya. Followed by someone who is a winner by birth. Her name is Prize Atsingwize, which also means a winner, interestingly. So, yeah. So, winner. Thank you very much. And now we'll have our ED come and tell us what we have been here for this entire time. Who among these four is going to be the big winner for today? And what do they go home with?
I've seen. Hi, thank you very much. I have been given the most difficult job, but I want first of all congratulate all our finalists. You were all winners, and I'm sure it was very tight for the judges. It must have given them headache to find a winner. We were on the side panel of the judges. In the same finals, we were able to predict who the winners were. But in this panel, we were unable to predict. And we just said, let the best man win. You were all winners. The difference in marks that I've just received from our judges, the marks range from 80% to 86%. So you can see how tight the race was, and that confirms that really you all got distinctions, I think, in the debate. So in the number 4 position, we have Mr. Titus Ngabirano from Busitema University. With 8.2%, which is a distinction. In the 3rd position, we have Titus Ogutu from Kampala International University with 83.7 score. In the 2nd position is Mr. Garang Lester with 84.6. And in the 1st position, ladies and gentlemen, is Mr. Mutungisa Edgar from Mbarara University of Science and Technology. Congratulations.
We'll have the certificates. You know, you can't take these things for granted. Normally in Uganda, the person they would have read in 1st position wouldn't have been in the top 4. So they will read and then the winner will be someone you think, wait, that wasn't in the finals. So congratulations. Let's get the certificates and have Sarah hand these over to our winners, starting with the winner, who is, we'll start with the 4th. Let's do it in that order. So that is Mr. Titus Ngabirano. Congratulations. Very well done to you. Our second runners-up, Mr. Titus Ogutu. Congratulations. Well done. Mr. Lester Garang. who came really close, but ended up being like Liverpool, where you're very good, but just not good enough, no matter how good you are. And of course, our champion, Mr. Edgar Mutungisa. Congratulations. Normally when you win, you give an acceptance speech, which we send to your mother. I don't know. I can give you 30 seconds to do that if you want, to greet your fans and, you know. So please come, 30 seconds. These are things that you take these things for granted. Eh? In the digital age, you keep this for your children. You say, you see, I'm not lying. I actually won this thing.
Okay, so thank you so much, everyone. I think, of course, it's explained so much that I'm excited. One, the opportunity from CCG, and especially for the issues that I'm definitely passionate about, even when I'm from a different discipline of engineering, but I definitely must practice this. Yes. Yeah, thanks so much. But also, I appreciate also my team that worked so hard to get me up to date. Personally, when they're reading the budget, I wasn't even in the country, but when I came back, just recently, people were able to put me to task. Thank you so much, and yeah, I appreciate it.
You're already sounding like a politician. We just hope for our sakes that you turn out to be a good one. I will be watching for you guys. I should just quickly point out, we want to do a group photo. I think we'll depend on our paparazzi to guide us on how we do that, where we do that, so you're going to be the boss. We'll maybe first have the judges with our winners. We'll have the judges, please come and take a group photo with our winners. I was just saying that about, maybe about 12 years ago, I had the privilege of being a chaperone for the Ugandan teams that went to the Celtel Africa Challenge, which was a university competition. And every single person that was on that team from Makerere University and Nkumba has ended up in a position of great leadership. So you guys being here means that you are already on the fast track to the highest offices in this land. And I need that you can prepare yourselves mentally for this because it's where you're going. So reduce the vibe, stop cheating a bit too much, and accept your responsibilities as leaders, okay? You need to start doing that now when you can. So we'll ask our paparazzi to please guide on what needs to happen. Ronnie the paparazzi. So we'll do a group picture with our winners. It's wide enough, so you should be able to capture everybody, not to worry. Me, I'm not in this picture. Leave me alone. I don't want to steal limelight from our actual winners today. The winners. Okay, now you can now take with me also. I also go and show my wife that I've been working. Hey, you laugh. You're getting married soon. You will know. These things are very, very important. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen. Yeah. The semi-finalists. Let's do a group picture with the semi-finalists. Semi-finalists. Some people can stand down and then we'll use the platform. So while you guys are laughing at me, I believe all of you are above 20. In the old Uganda, by now you should have your third child. Yeah, in the traditional African culture, by now, you should be planning for your third or fourth child. True story. Please make sure you smile. Let's try and squeeze everyone onto the stage. Please come. again, like I said, these things are important because you will need them in the future. These are the things that go on to show that you started your journey early enough.